It was a wonderful sunny weather outside. People calmly go about their business, strolling through the streets of the city. Suddenly, the ground trembled and people could barely stand on their feet. Everyone was scared and did not understand what was happening around. Some speculate that it could have been an earthquake. After a second, this shock was repeated again and something shuddered. The woman could barely stay on her feet. The woman was frightened and also did not understand what a strange loud sound it was. The woman shifted her alarmed gaze to the man, who continued to stand just as calmly. The man reassured the stranger and waved her off, saying that nothing had happened and that she should go where she was going. But the woman continues to panic anyway, because she thinks it's an earthquake. The green-eyed warrior calmly explains that young Master Yuan is currently out for a walk. The woman thought it was a complete delusion. Soon the unknown tremor happened again. Then the man decides to prove it and opens the door for the woman to see for herself. Behind the door, outside, was a big boy. He could barely move his legs due to his extra weight, but he tried nonetheless. But, unexpectedly, Yuan was unable to support his own weight and fell straight to the ground, losing his balance. The warrior immediately ran to the young gentleman to help the boy. The guy immediately starts yelling at the man because he asked not to come to him. Then, the guard immediately turned away and headed for the exit. After several attempts, almost suffocating, the boy still managed to stand up. He hated his body, but even in spite of his terrible body and his failures, the boy promised himself that he would not lose. Yuan was full of determination and prepared for his next move. Willpower still prevailed, and Yuan was able to take a step, although he was breathing very hard. He shouts loudly but still continues to walk. Even insects flying nearby are frightened by such persistence. But suddenly, Yuan felt an unbearable pain in his neck, followed by a headache. The boy spat out his own blood, and a second later our hero simply fell to the ground, and his pants began to split at the seams with a crack. The boy lay still and did not move. He just couldn't believe that it happened to him. The guard, meanwhile, was already quickly rushing to the young master, while consciousness was leaving him. He thought only of what he had to save Miriam. The boy begins his story. His name is Jean Vigan, and he went back in time to save Miriam. And although everything looks peaceful in Marima now, chaos and disorder will soon reign here. Upon his appearance, the faithful subject of chaos united the infidel Miriam and drowned the central plain in blood. Against this enemy, all the clans united to defeat him, but despite their numbers, they were all defeated. If you think about it, the subject of chaos is powerful. Not everyone will be able to unite Miriam. Jean Vigan hated this scumbag because it was the chaos and disorder he created that left the boy fatherless. The guy lived as he wanted. He constantly fought and believed that he was incapable of anything. However, one day he met masters who extended a hand to him. It seemed that a bright streak had finally begun in the life of our hero, and hope appeared in his eyes. But everything turned out to be not as rosy as it seemed. From that day, the boy began to undergo difficult training and exams. He was thrown into the water, forced to dodge complex attacks, and many other different things. The masters put Jean Vigan through such difficult training because they wanted the boy to conquer chaos. They created everything they could think of. Thus, the masters condemned our hero to suffering when he was still very young. After some time, our hero got the body of his dreams. He had strong muscles and stamina. By the end of this hellish training, Jean Vigan had mastered all the martial arts of the teachers. This is how the boy ended up in the past, all because of the plan of his teachers. The young man must kill the subject of chaos, and everything will be fine. But the boy could not even think that he would get into such a huge body with extra kilograms. How should he train if he can't even take a step? Suddenly, the boy coughs up his own blood again, and his father, Yu Sung-wan, asks Dr. Yang Seo-yeon to do something to help his son. First, Jean Vigan needs to lose some extra weight in order to overcome the enemy, as well as to improve his fighting skills. The main character must find a chaste ginseng. He must find his former subordinate. The doctor says that the fact that the patient is spitting up blood is good. This is a sign that he is getting better. The boy feels as if he has forgotten something. His enemy will receive ginseng in about 6 years. They begin to quarrel because the father is worried about his son and insists that the doctor cure him. The guy still had to blow everything, but unexpectedly, he realized that this event will not happen in 6 years, but in 6 months. He only has 6 months to do it, so hurry. Realizing this, our hero became very nervous because there was very little time. The doctor was very angry that he had dared to call them old. It was very rude. But the father was completely indifferent to this. He was glad that his son had already gotten better. The father fell on his son's chest and hugged him tightly. It was all just because the guy voted. A second later, the man switched back to the doctor and started growling because his son's face was too red. But as soon as Yuan called out to his father, He immediately leaned towards him and walked over to listen. After a second, the boy raises himself slightly on his elbows and begins his request. It turns out that our hero says that he would like to go for a walk. This causes a strong shock on the father's face, but he does not object to this and orders his subordinates to urgently bring a 4-seater stretcher here. A second later, athletic men carrying a stretcher enter the room. The father called them so that the son would lie on a stretcher, and subordinates would carry him down the street so that he would be in the fresh air. But the boy does not understand at all what is the point of such a walk. He wants to walk on his own 2 feet. Then the father calls Huang Zheng, and he takes his hand to help him walk. Although it was difficult, the man courageously held on. Everyone was shocked by Yu Hyun's sudden desire to walk alone. It didn't seem like him at all. Huang Chong himself could not believe that the young man actually got up and went for a walk. No one would take his word for it. Yu Sung wept with nostalgia as he remembered how his son had walked the same way at the age of 10. Now it became clear to our hero why this body is in such a terrible state. Everyone present was shocked when they saw how the young gentleman moved by himself. It felt like it was just a dream. Everyone watched his every step with admiration and counted. He has already taken 4 steps. But our hero was sure that now is not the time to be surprised that he just left. Everyone's lives depended on Yu Hyun's recovery, so he would have to train. We'll have to fight for everyone's life. Our hero trained like crazy and was engaged in walking for about half a month, but for some reason there were no changes. After walking a little further, Yu Hyun sat down on the swing to rest, because rest is also very important. At that time, Huang Chong was engaged in housekeeping and drove the pigs to the pen. It was something like a scale. With every second, more pigs entered the pen. After a few seconds, the rope that held the group of pigs broke, and they fell to the ground. This meant that the boy still lost not enough weight. If everything will be the same, then the boy will not have time to do anything. There were so many problems to get here, and killing a subordinate is just as difficult. He suddenly realized that the subordinate was just his nickname. But then what was his name? Our hero was very upset that he did not see any progress. The main character tries to remember the name of his enemy, but could not. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't remember his name. The masters kept telling him the name, but he still forgot it. Yu Hyun couldn't remember his name or what he looked like. The boy could not remember absolutely anything. Huang Chong understands that it is usually difficult for fat people to lose weight. He offers his help. First you need to reduce sugar in his diet, and then create a menu with food rich in protein. But it seems that our hero does not listen to the man at all and continues to think about how to lose weight. Are the memory lapses caused by time travel? But how can this be if he remembers everything else? In any case, the enemy will appear in Anhu province, with the aim of finding the chaste ginseng. Yu Hyun comes up with the idea to find the root first and just wait for the enemy. Because without the mystic arts, he will be weak. The boy was very bored, and his eyes were closing. Who would have thought that a subject of chaos would be so weak? All this was only in the fantasies and dreams of our hero. He is going to deal with this bastard in Anhu province, and with his own hands pull out the sprout of chaos. The end of this mission is the beginning of his new life. This thought inspired hope in the heart, and after a second, our hero starts laughing loudly. An evil laugh comes from his mouth and spreads throughout the yard. Huang Zhong was shocked, and silently watched the young gentleman who was behaving quite strangely. Huang Zhong could only hug the piglet and whimper at her because he thinks it's a side effect of training. After a second, he dropped all the pigs and ran after the doctor to bring him to the young master. The main character really wants his plan to work. First, you have to do something with this weak fat body, but if he continues to walk, he won't be able to do it in 10 years. Therefore, another method will have to be found. Just a second later, our hero is approached by a doctor and a subordinate with lightning speed to help Yu Hyun. Dr. Yang Seo-yeon quickly approaches our hero, and he notices him immediately. Yang Seo-yeon became the emperor's physician before he was 30, bypassing others. In his 50s, he developed his own methods of treatment. This man is the savior of our hero. From the moment Yu Hyun spoke of his desire to walk, the doctor should have known immediately that something was wrong with his mind. Yu Hyun asked if Yang Seo-yeon was really the best healer in the Central Plain. He asks if the doctor can create a medicine that will help him lose weight. The doctor was shocked to hear that the boy wanted to lose excess weight in just a month. Yu Hyun is full of faith that he will be able to lose weight, and he looks at the doctor with hope. The doctor does not answer, but only squints and nods. The doctor says that everything looks as if he was injured not in the head, but in the heart. Did the rejection of the clan hurt him so much? There are some medicines that will help restore the body if you take it for a long time. The boy asks if it is possible to cope in 6 months, but the doctor says that it is impossible to cope in such a period. It will take at least 3 years. Yu Hyun slapped his face. He understood that he could not be counted on. Even a simple walk is a big problem for our hero, but these are not all the methods they have. The main character was interested in these words and wanted to know what the doctor meant. After some time, they come to the waterfall. Yu Hyun wonders why he didn't think to use the water's repulsive power himself. The main character is going to train here every day. The subordinates do not understand why the young master had such a strong desire to train. It would be better if he continued to lie in bed. Yu Hyun says that he needs to immerse his whole body in this water. Walking in water is much easier, so Yu Hyun decided to try to go a little further. After taking a few steps forward, the young man stops feeling the bottom under his feet. The depth here is too great. Yu Hyun falls under the water and begins to drown. Breathing is almost finished, and Hwang Jong is watching all this. But the man does not see any problem in the fact that the young man went under the water. He thinks that the boy really enjoyed playing in the water. Meanwhile, the main character is nearing the bottom. He was slowly dying because the air in his lungs was running out, and he had to be rescued urgently. Hwang Chong doesn't see any problem in this, and is only surprised that the young man can even dive. But another subordinate suggests that Yu Hyun might be drowning because there are channels in rivers that are very deep. After these words, the blonde man turns his gaze to the water again. The two of them look at the place where Yu Hyun went under the water. Finally, it dawned on Hwang Jung, and he realized the seriousness of the whole situation. The man does not know what to do, but it is clear that the young man must be saved. Meanwhile, the young man was already at the very bottom of the river. The air was gradually running out. His life flashed before our hero's eyes. A horse-drawn carriage is moving quickly along the road, and all this is watched from the side by our hero. But he is not ordinary, as if he is translucent. Gene Wiggin himself does not understand what is happening here. A bloodied woman is sitting inside the cart, holding a 2-year-old child in her arms. It was Yu Hyun. The woman rocks the baby a little, trying to calm him down. Jin Wegang soon realized that he was now seeing Yu Hyun's childhood memories. Looking at the 2-year-old Yu Hyun a little more, our hero concludes that he was quite cute as a child. Suddenly, something begins to happen. The child screams even louder. The mother is trembling with pain. Her whole body was covered in blood. She hugs the baby tightly, trying to give him all her remaining warmth, and says that despite everything, Yu Hyun must survive. The main character watches this situation with horror. Jin Vegan quickly looks around, trying to figure out where Yu Sung is now and why he isn't with them. Mother's clean tears drip on the baby, causing him to smile. Seeing this, the corners of the woman's lips also turned up. What happened next caused the boy to scream loudly. Meanwhile, our hero was getting closer and closer to the bottom. It would seem that no one can save him. And even Hwang Chong couldn't do anything because he couldn't swim, so he just walked nervously in place. After a few seconds, a woman appeared above the water, greedily gulping for air. He held Yu Hyun in his arms. Hwang Chong instantly calmed down when he saw that the young master was fine. The female, meanwhile, began to pull him out of the water. Finally, they reached the shore. The motionless body fell to the ground. Hwang Jung seemed a bit ashamed of his inaction and asked why she was here alone. The girl explained that the young lady had asked her to go ahead, which is why she was here. But now it was better to think about the young gentleman. Remembering the problem with the boy, the subordinate started to get nervous again. Our hero was still not breathing, but at least he was already on the ground. After a while, Yang So-yeon and Hwang Jung were already sitting on their knees in front of our hero's father, who was waiting for their excuses. The man was waiting for at least a few reasons not to cut off their heads right now. A second later, Hwang Chong blurts out that the emperor's physician himself offered the young master a swim. It was indeed Yang So-yeon's suggestion. Then, Yu Sung addressed the doctor in a harsh and malicious voice. The master had already drawn his sword in front of the doctor, preparing him for the death penalty. A man intends to kill this bastard for putting his son in mortal danger. Suddenly, in the midst of events, a black girl enters the room. The adorable girl calms the man down a bit and says that Yu Hyun just passed out. But first, the girl wants to hear what Dr. Yang So-yeon has to say about this, because he has been monitoring the boy's health for many years. The doctor bursts out of his seat and confidently begins to blame the Namgun clan for everything. He says that Yu Hyun was shocked and upset that he was denied the wedding, so he wanted to lose weight, and Yang Seo was just helping. From this, the anger of the master dies down a little. Now he blames himself, because in his anger he did not think about his own son's feelings. They are interrupted by a girl who asks why not just let Yu Hyun swim. Everyone looked at her in surprise. Yu Jung-hae, our hero's older sister, says that you can swim not only in the river. Some time passes and Yu Hyun finally comes to his senses. It is difficult for him to believe that he almost drowned in the pitiful stream. But from these memories he saw when he was at the bottom, it became clear that Hyun grew up without a mother. And the father cares so much for his son because he is afraid of losing him, as he once lost his wife. Judging by his character, Sung loved that woman very much, which is probably why he is so fixated on taking care of his son. And this monstrous body was the result of his own father's hyperopia. Suddenly, a young lady entered the room and laid her down. They called Hyun with them. At first, our hero didn't understand who it was, but then it dawned on him that most likely, it was the sister of the boy in whose body he was now. But then why is this girl so beautiful? Jean Vigan has doubts about her being his relative. Meanwhile, a maid approaches Hyun's bed and says she can help him up. But Hyun doesn't believe that a woman would be able to pick him up so easily because even Hwang Jong and the 4 men barely did it. But the woman doesn't react to these words at all and quickly picks the boy up, saying that she is better than Hwang Jung. A smug smile appears on her face. It's time to go. And lo, they were already on the street. 4 men were carrying the young man. But the main character did not understand why these people were in such a high mood. Suddenly, when he saw something in front of them, he opened his mouth wide in surprise. The boy was shocked when he saw this. Workers carried stones and moved them while building something. All of this was watched by Hwang Chong, who seems to have been in charge of the process. The workers, meanwhile, continued to move stones. The main character came forward and asked, "What is so strange they are doing?" But no one answered him. Our hero had the idea that they were digging a grave. Suddenly, our hero's sister comes here and says that now he won't need to go to the river to swim. Hyun still doesn't understand what's going on here. And so, after a second, water begins to be poured into this hole, and only then does it reach the hole. The staff specially made a personal pond for him so he could swim. When those present saw the young gentleman, they were very happy about it, even when they saw that he was standing on his own feet. Everyone began to congratulate him, but the young man could not understand why those present were laughing. Because his father literally forced these unfortunates to make this bet for his sake, but they only smile and rejoice. But there was no time to think about it, because Hwang Chong breathed out, pushing everyone forward. But suddenly, he saw that the subordinate sister of our hero was watching all this. So he instantly stopped and became more serious, telling the young gentleman that they would finish by the end of the day. It seems that the man liked this girl. Hyun was curious to know who planned all of this, and assumed that it was his father who thought it all up. If our hero wants to know about it so much, then Hwang Chong is ready to tell him about it. All this was invented by a great scientist, whom absolutely all specialists look up to, Yuan. He is a symbol of good faith. But that's not all. When the family manifests, he opens the Yu clan storage to share food and water with the others. Finally, it dawns on Hyun that he is the son of a real rich man. Hwang Chong continued to praise Yu Sung, but the boy didn't want to listen to it anymore. He came up with something else. Hyun realized that he didn't need to do anything to live a great life. Finally, the construction of the pond was finished, and our hero began to train. When he emerged from the water, he asked Hwang Jong if he had prepared what the boy asked for. The man was barely able to lift this contraption, and with trembling hands and feet approached the edge of the cliff. If there was no chaos, then the boy would live an interesting life, just being a fool. Meanwhile, Hwang Jong had already closed the shackles on Hyun's leg and was ready to throw the heavy contraption into the water. After a second, the man released her and she flew straight into the water. This heavy contraption dragged our hero along, and after a second, he returned to the water with a fur coat, causing a big wave. Soon, the core sank to the very bottom of the pond. The main character 6, accordingly, also ended up at the bottom. A person's blood vessels are completely open at birth, but slowly grow over with age. That is why it is better to start training young. But for a body that has never been trained, it will be a very long time, maybe even 100 years. The guy thinks that he will not get the necessary internal energy even after 1,000 years. But, even so, the masters have prepared special training for a situation like this. And the name of this training is the technique of cultivating the spiritual energy of the heart. The energy will go directly to the heart instead of the energy center, through arteries instead of energy veins. This is all the technique. The main character is focused on doing all the actions correctly. After several attempts, Hyun finally managed to do what he wanted. Spiritual energy will replace his own and fill his heart. The black boy could clearly sense her. Soon, the boy began to create a strong vortex under the water. With every second and his movement, the force and flow of water became greater and greater. Seeing that he is succeeding, the young man decides to try something else. Then Hyun gets into a fighting stance, preparing to do what he had in mind. He wants to make the first and strongest Shaolin technique, which can destroy huge stones at a distance of more than 30 meters. A second later, the protagonist uses the 100-foot mystic fist technique. After that, a strong vortex and waves appear on the surface of the water. The indulgence of the 8 immortals, walking as if they were drunk. It was a sword with an infinite number of vibrations. Namgun Clan Heavenly Sword. At this time, the man was sitting on the shore and marveled at how the young man was able to stay underwater a lot. In fact, Huang Chong thought that the boy would surrender in a few days, but it had already been a whole month. When the boy asked him about the iron layer, he looked like he was mad. And so, after some time, our hero emerged from the water and turned to his subordinate. After that, they went to hang the young man. Huang led the pigs to the pen. The boy trained like crazy for a whole month, with a body that no legendary masters could fix. Finally, the long-awaited hanging day has arrived. If a guy can't get rid of that damn fat, then there's no hope at all. Soon, our hero takes the first step and stands on the scales. Huang Chong even stopped breathing for a moment in excitement. They waited for the needle on the scales to finally stop. His heart almost jumped out of his chest when the boy realized that he was able to lose weight. Tears of happiness appeared in his eyes. Huang was also incredibly happy for the young man and immediately ran to him. The boys hugged tightly and almost cried from happiness. Yu Hyun sobbed with happiness and hugged his subordinate tightly, saying that if he wasn't there, he wouldn't have been able to do anything. After a second, our hero deviated a little and apologized for his emotionality, but Huang understood everything perfectly. Now it will no longer be necessary to sew clothes that are torn every day. Better times will come to Sandaoka. Now it will be easier for him, and the carriers will no longer have to burden their backs. The subordinate says that because of the boy's overweight, there are even rumors that he is adopted. And he added that the boy was refused a wedding because of his excess weight. The mood of our hero changed dramatically, because he already asked to stop talking about it. The blonde man began to tremble with fear, and said that the manager had asked him to do something. It seems that it was not true. The man was just scared. A second later, he quickly ran away. Yu Hyun gained spiritual energy and lost some weight, but he still has a long way to go. If inner energy is something that people acquire through endless training, then the technique of cultivating spiritual energy can be compared to the use of magical plants or creatures. There is very little time left, but before starting to do something, it would be good to regain spiritual energy. It was the Emperor's physician who said that energy should be renewed with snacks. His body is definitely in shock from training in the water. The main character immediately threw himself at the food that the doctor brought him, because he was too hungry. Yu Hyun couldn't help but notice that Yang Seo was quite a useful oddball. Now the boy was busy gathering spiritual energy to put it into his body. Although there was very little energy, drop by drop it gathered strength. Every day the young man grew stronger and was already looking forward to meeting the cursed servant of chaos. It will come very soon. Thus, the main character continued to train hard, not feeling sorry for himself at all. 2 months passed like this, and every day Yu Hyun practiced hard to achieve his goal. The boy continued to diligently practice the techniques, and each time he got better. The boy's strength grew day by day. The waves and streams of water he caused became much larger. Huang Chong was shocked to see that it was a palm technique. But after a second, he rejects this idea because he thinks that this scum is not capable of such a thing. Suddenly, he heard a voice behind him and looked around. It was Yu Sung who heard Huang Chong call his son a pig. The man once again asked about whom this scumbag was talking about, and was ready to draw his sword. Another subordinate ordered Huang Zhong away urgently before something bad happened. The head manager is only glad that Huang Chong made such a mistake. He wishes he had spent some time in the dungeon. As the man is being dragged away, Yu Sung asks if the chief steward saw what just happened. Yu Sung could clearly see that his son was practicing martial arts, and he had just used the palm technique. The father is sorry that his son is not interested in science, but he still has to support him. After a second, the gray-haired man ordered some paper, pen, and ink to be brought to him. It had to be done urgently. Some time passed. Father gave our hero a book called The Technique of the Divine Sky. It was a secret martial art straight from the Emperor's estate. Yu Hyun knew that his father was quite intelligent, but it was difficult to understand how he could obtain the martial art technique of the Emperor himself. Yu Sung says that he just texted him once and hinted that Yu Hyun was interested in martial arts. In fact, this is a lie, because my father wrote letters every day. The man tried very hard for his son and actually sent letters every day. Even when the man did not receive an answer to his letters, he still diligently continued to write them. In addition, the father added that now our hero will have a teacher. And besides, the teacher of our hero turned out to be none other than his sister's husband. The man's name is Dam Chun Woo. He is Yu Jung-hee's husband. He came here to teach our hero. The head of the Dam clan would crawl on his knees for the boy to teach him his fighting techniques. The boy does not understand at all what he should do with these fools. Perhaps the truth should be told? But he understands that this will only create a mess, so now is not the time to reveal his true power. Suddenly the guy comes up with a great excuse that might work. If someone asks, he will simply answer that he learned personally from Dam Chunwu. And if they want to know about the technique, he will mention the Imperial Divine Heaven. After a second, our hero falls on his knees in front of his teacher and asks to accept this vow. The father even shed tears from such politeness of his son. And so, very soon, Yu Hyun's rigorous training began. Dam Chun couldn't understand why Yu Hyun couldn't perform even such light exercises. He is a very strict coach. Anger slowly boiled in the veins of our hero. It seems he overdid it. It seems that the main character's nerves are about to end if he continues to talk to him so brazenly. The boy asked the teacher to move on to other exercises, because he needs to understand other aspects. The narcissistic and self-confident man could not believe that such a loser could ever learn anything. Parubak could no longer tolerate such a terrible treatment of himself. Then, he challenges his teacher and says that they will check it now. The teacher does not take his words seriously at first, because he clearly did not expect this. Our hero challenges him to a duel. Now they will find out which of them is stronger. A second later, the teacher laughs loudly because he still does not take the student's words seriously and thinks that he is an ordinary fool. Then, the boy takes him lightly and says that he must have been afraid to accept the challenge. Yu Hyun continued to tease the man, trying to bring him out. Thus, the teacher lost control over his emotions and agreed to a fight. But the teacher did not want to fight with a strong advantage, so he sealed the inner energy. The main character only watched his actions with a sarcastic look. The teacher was so self-confident that he even tied himself up. The main character starts his attack and uses the Dragon and Phoenix technique. And so, after a second, he flies at his opponent with lightning speed. The boy throws a punch, but the teacher manages to dodge it. Dam is surprised that the student was able to use several movements of the fist technique so smoothly at once. The boy again felt that he was uncomfortable because of the attention in his body. That is why it was necessary to finish as soon as possible. And then, after a second, the boy hit the teacher hard in the side, saying that only strong people can behave like that. In pain, the teacher bent over and moaned softly. And after a second, he lost his balance altogether and fell. The narcissistic teacher could not even think that our hero is capable of such a thing. But it seems that wasn't all, because soon after Yu Hyun jumped on his teacher, he smiled widely and his palm turned into a fist again. He's not done yet. Meanwhile, the soldiers stand guard at the entrance to the estate. Huang Chong seems to be feeling unwell, and a friend suggested that he go and rest, but the man refused because it was the ruler's order. It is obvious that the man wants to sleep very much, but still refuses to go and rest. Suddenly, a young man's voice was heard. It turns out that Huang has been demoted. The main character was very glad that this scoundrel had learned his lesson. The warrior asks why the young master is not in training now, and the boy answers that his teacher is not in a condition to teach him. Our hero assumes that the beaten teacher has most likely come to his senses. Yes, Dam Wu really came to his senses and told his wife that the disciple had defeated him in battle. The man's whole body hurt and he was covered in bandages, and he could not even scratch his head. But it seems that his wife did not care at all. On the contrary, she was only happy and began to jump and dance. Yu Jung had always believed that her brother was a great martial artist and was very happy that her expectations had been met. When her husband once again said that he was in a lot of pain, the girl simply replied that he needed to lie down for a while and rest. At the same time, the cart was moving to Anping Prefecture. Soon they arrived at the right place. The rider turned to his ruler and said that they had arrived at the place. No matter how much the ruler thought, he could not see a reason to intervene in this situation personally. But if Mr. Yu insisted on it, then the man should take part in it. The ruler ordered Zhou Song to go to the poor man's clan branch in Anping Prefecture. Meanwhile, Yu Hyun strolled through the streets of the city. It was the first time he had walked alone in this body. He wants to see the world before chaos begins. He watched people's lives. Everyone was doing something of their own. Everyone had their own affairs. Life was bubbling and flourishing here. People were smiling and happy. This picture warmed the soul of our hero. In his past life, he does not remember the last time he heard laughter. When the servant of chaos appeared, darkness took over all light and joy. There was not a single corner left on earth where you could rest. There were corpses everywhere, wet sleeves and piercing winter winds. The main character sincerely hoped that he would be sent as far as possible at the start. Now he must save this world. Suddenly, passers-by noticed the young man and asked what he was doing here. Rumors that Yu Hyun went out for a walk by himself quickly spread around. and very soon, passers-by surrounded the young man from all sides, began to look and talk about him. One of the women offered him to taste a delicious kebab. This food looked very tasty and attractive. But our hero perfectly understood that it would be harmful to his body. Another woman wanted to present the young gentleman with the best silk they had received just a few days ago. Other people also started offering their gifts. Someone wanted to give a vase, someone something else. The gifts were very diverse, from a rooster and a cat to a sword that was made of the best materials. The main character just wanted to walk, not carry it all in his hands. He no longer has room for a gift, but people still continued to bring him gifts. Yuan did not understand what purpose they were doing this for. In fact, the old man was pleased that people loved him and gave him gifts, but he could not live like this for the rest of his days. If he lived like that, he wouldn't even be able to get out of bed. Unexpectedly, the main character feels something strange, which instantly freezes and listens. He begins to look around to find the cause of this strange feeling, but finds nothing. So Yuan thinks that he just had an idea, even though it was strange. But the boy did not give up. He was watched by an unknown person in a mask and a big hat. He realized that Yuan had noticed him, but after a second, he rejects this idea, because our hero can't even walk normally, so he definitely wouldn't feel his energy. The stranger wants to check it out, but suddenly our hero peeks out from around the corner and calls out to him. The stranger certainly did not expect this, but he was not going to deal with it. He prepares to strike. Fortunately, Yuan managed to quickly react to the attack and put a block. Immediately after that, something explodes on the street, and with this the stranger tries to escape. Passers-by do not understand what happened here, and immediately run to the young man to see if everything is okay with him. When people run up to him, they see that the young man has lost consciousness. It is necessary to urgently call a doctor. One of the men notices a suspicious stranger in a raincoat trying to run away. It is urgent to catch him, but the stranger continues to run away. People tried to shout at our hero, and he seems to have started to come to his senses. Suddenly he opened his eyes and suddenly jumped to his feet, asking where that scoundrel ran off to. Our hero was incredibly angry with him and wanted to kill this bastard. People watched this with horror and were afraid of what would happen next. The main character quickly shakes off the dust and dirt, saying that everything is fine with him, although in reality he was in a lot of pain. Yuan tries to figure out who it was. Parabok did not understand where a fighter of such a high level appeared in Anpin, but that was not important now. Anpin is only a small part of Murim. The main character hurried to training. He urgently needs to improve his fighting skills. His training builds spiritual energy, and he's almost done with it. All that remained was to lose weight and gather information. He needs more information about virgin ginseng. It seems that the time has come to visit the poor man's clan. Yu Sung was talking to Yu Jung about our hero. Science and martial arts are said to be related, and the old man thinks his son has inherited his intelligence. But the girl asks her father not to make such a noise, because it is too early for such a thing. It is still too early to send the boy to the emperor, because he has only recently started walking, let alone martial arts. The girl assumed that her father wanted to do this because of the Namgun clan. He immediately became upset. Yes, she does not deny that her brother may have been the reason for refusing the wedding, but it could also just be Namgun Hai's own decision. He never had any desire to get married, even as a child. She was going to become a master of martial arts who owed nothing to anyone. But the father is still very tired, and the daughter thinks that maybe it is not because of the Namgun clan. It turns out that the husband still blames himself for the death of his wife. If he doesn't do this, he will never get rid of his sin in front of Yuan. The man blames himself because his enemies persecuted him, not his wife. Yu Sung-yi still thinks that he should have died instead of his wife that day. Meanwhile, the people riding in the cart think that our hero will again promote the idea of a wedding. There are rumors about him that he is very lazy and lies in bed for hours. Yuan has never been a personality. He is someone who would be rejected by anyone. That is what they are here for. It is important to know the enemy and know yourself, then they will not lose to anyone. That is why the leader of the Namgun clan, Han Su, plans to learn absolutely everything about our hero. This is the only way to get rid of it once and for all. Meanwhile, Yuan sneezed loudly. According to the omen, it meant that someone was mentioning him behind his back, but it didn't really bother him. What was more interesting was why there was absolutely no one on the street. The main character looked everywhere, but did not find anyone, although this alley should be full of poor people. Yuan does not give up and continues to look for someone, but still without success. Suddenly, a man with a broom comes out from around the corner and asks what the young gentleman has forgotten here. Yuan replied that he was just walking around here. He does not understand why there are no poor people in this alley. He says that there has been no poverty in the entire Anping region since the 20s. The ruler built houses for the vagabonds and gave them farms to earn money. Yu Hyun remembered the legend that there are those who hide in the shadows of the walls. Those who have their own network of informants. This group will fill the entire Murim, and their name is the Poor Man's Clan. Then finally it dawned on the young man that without the poor there would be no clan. The man just looks at him questioningly, trying to understand which clan he is talking about. Meanwhile, a man was talking to the ruler. He doubts that the ruler came all this way just to drink tea. Oh Hyun, the branch head of the Poor Man's Clan, immediately understood that the ruler needed information about Yu Hyun, who was about to get married. We needed information that would help get rid of our hero forever. As expected from a poor clan, they understood everything immediately, even without explanation. Oh Hyun said that the information about the young master is a special case, and everything should also be discussed with the head. Jo Song didn't understand what was the point of the head personally hiding information about the son of a scholar who wasn't even in their clan. Oh Hyun explained that it was all about the Yu family. The anger of their old man will not only harm the branch in Anpin, even the head will be very unhappy. The ruler ponders his words. A second later, he throws a bag of money on the table. The man is ready to pay any amount for such information. But even so, Oh Hyun can't do it. He already explained everything. First, he must obtain permission from the head of the clan. But the ruler does not give up. He even removes the emperor's ring, preparing to pay with it. This ring means that its owner receives full protection from the Namgun clan. Meanwhile, the main character was busy looking for a poor house and finally found it. But when he tried to go inside, he was stopped by a security guard who told him to come later because there were guests there. Yu Hyun was very upset about being called fat, but this time he decided to bear it. The main character continues to stand still but asks the guard to let him pass. Suddenly, the man raises his sword and hits our hero right on the head. He repeated again for the boy to go away. Parabok was ready to stand up for himself, because he had just been treated like a pig. Meanwhile, some strangers were discussing the old tiger, Yu Sung. Oh Hyun did not understand why the ruler would go to such lengths and give away such important items in exchange for information. Does he really dislike the lack of their family with our hero? The man thinks he has given enough for the information. Oh Hyun is not going to argue and soon gives the ruler a book that contains all the information about our hero from the moment he was born until yesterday. But no one should know that the man is giving him such a valuable book. Then, the man swears by the name of his clan to keep it a secret. Suddenly they hear a noise and a voice somewhere outside. Someone is shouting. Jo-sun looks out the window to see what caused the noise and sees our hero and bodyguard there. The guard did not expect this pig to be so stubborn. The man praises this guy's skills. But the main character gets funny when he hears the man calling his sword heavenly. It was not a joke that angered the man because the boy mocked the style and technique of his clan. But Yu Hyun only looked down on his enemy, not his clan, because this technique really looked ridiculous in his unfortunate hands. He can swing his sword for at least a week, but there will be no result. If this scumbag apologizes right now, then our hero can still forgive him. The warrior was even more angry that the boy had dared to call him that. In the end, the warrior's nerves ran out, and he wanted to take revenge for such bad words about his native clan. He took out his sword again. He placed me against the boy's neck, and said that he would no longer just be silent. Realizing that a fight cannot be avoided, our hero looks down and punches him hard in the stomach. Now this bastard is going to regret not just walking away when he had the chance. A second later, he delivered another blow, but this time to the face. Yu Hyun just keeps beating the man and he can't even give up. He slams it into the ground with all his might. After that, he lifts him up with one hand and says that he will now teach him good manners. The main character is going to teach him this by beating him. A predatory smile appears on his face, and after a moment, he begins a long series of blows to his face. The man's face is already very swollen and he asks to stop, but Yu Hyun doesn't listen. Suddenly, when the boy looks up, he sees a person there. This man jumps right between our hero and his victim. It seems to be Jo-sun's boy. Although Yu Hyun managed to dodge, the man immediately rushed after him. Suddenly, the protagonist felt something painfully familiar. The enemy was already preparing to strike. The enemy wanted to use the explosive lightning mystic palm, so our hero has to deal with this technique. The guy perfectly understands that in this body, he will not be able to take the head off his opponent. So he must act in a different way. He gathers a large amount of energy between his palms as he prepares to strike. Parabok uses a technique in which energy is channeled into the palm for an explosive impact. A second later, he catches his enemy's fist in his palms and is about to send his energy back, then neutralize the momentum. A real battle is taking place between the boys, and it is not clear who will win. It is very difficult for both of them. Suddenly, all this is noticed by the ruler, who looked out of the window. He wants to know what is happening here, but the boys still continue to stand in this position. Which of them will be more durable? The main character's powers are gradually running out, but he still continues to stand his ground. It is very difficult for the young man, but he does not take his eyes off his opponent. And suddenly he looks him straight in the eyes and notices how strong his thirst for victory is. The main character remembered his training in a past life. He remembered how he could train the same movement 30,000 times. And his training was constantly watched by a one-eyed man. Gene Vegan mechanically repeated the same movements, practicing them until they were perfect. His training was tough. He had to practice these movements while standing on a small fireplace with a plank on top. He had to balance. Such physical exertion caused severe pain in the muscles, but the boy continued to perform the training. And so, when the boy made the 30,000th swing with the sword, he lost his balance and fell into the water. The man who watched it all said that the problem was that the boy was not holding the sword firmly enough, and told him to repeat the exercise 10,000 more times. But even at night, the training did not end. They sparred against each other. The one-eyed man definitely had an advantage over the young man and easily defeated him. Just then, the man hit him and the young man flew headfirst into the ground. Gene Wigan clutched at the ghoul that appeared on his head and complained that the master was using the sword as a stick. It took only a second for the boy to realize what he had said, but it was already too late. The teacher was angry and looked at him with a piercing look, but the teacher does not shout, but on the contrary smiles. If the student has time to get angry, then he has already understood the basics of the sword. There is no greater joy for a teacher than to see the growth of his own student, and the teacher swings at him, preparing to help progress even faster. Yuan recognized a very familiar face in his opponent, as if it was his teacher, and precisely because he was distracted, he weakened his blow. The enemy immediately took advantage of this, and after a second, the protagonist could not stand on his feet and flew back a few meters. Everything swam before his eyes, and a large bruise appeared on his face from the blow. Our hero only heard familiar voices and shouts of his name. Several men ran to the yard and began to say that the young man simply succumbed to this scoundrel. While Jo-sun tried to finish off the enemy, the boy completely dissipated the explosive force. But the black boy does not understand at all how our hero was able to turn such a thing. At this time, Yuan is lying on the ground, beaten. He groans in pain and vows to kill the bastard. After a second, he gathers all his strength into a fist and rises to his feet. His fight is not over yet. Rage boils in the veins. He still wants to kill this bastard for daring to interfere and humiliate him. Jo-sung just stares at his opponent silently with his deep yellow eyes. A strong aura is coming from Jo-sun. The boys stand opposite each other. The black boy looks questioningly at our hero, not understanding what will happen next. Jo-sung doesn't understand why everyone has come to the defense of this scoundrel. They were literally covering it with their bodies. A second later, the protagonist fell to the ground without moving. Everyone rushed to the guy because he lost consciousness. It turns out that this was already the 1863rd time when the boy lost consciousness. The ruler did not know how to react to the situation. A second later, Oh-hyun enters the room. He was just looking for the ruler in order to say that he had already written a letter to the head. All that remained was to wait for an answer. The two of them watched the commotion in the yard in shock. People crowded around Yuan, who lay motionless on the ground. The ruler and Jo-sung could not believe their ears. Was it really Yuan? Right after that, Oh-hyun rushed to the young master to check on him. He immediately began examining him, trying to find out what kind of bastard had done this to his master. The people present looked around, and with murderous eyes looked at the one who caused such a state of the young gentleman. Jo-sun froze on the spot when he realized what he had done. He had no excuses. He only quickly took his frightened and embarrassed gaze away from the people, looking at his father. Looks like the guy screwed up. But the father was not upset at all. He looked at the book he had received at such a high price, and a laugh burst from his chest. A second later, he tears the book he received in half because he says he won't need it anymore. Soon, this news reached Yu-sung as well. Father blamed the poor clan for everything, but Oh-hyun tried to reassure him that the ruler had nothing to do with it. He explained that it was all the work of the Namgun clan, and pointed a finger at Jo-sung, who was staring awkwardly at the ground. The father tried to defend his son, and said that he only did this because he did not know that this was a young gentleman. By their logic, if he attacked someone else, it would be okay. That's not what the man meant, but there's nothing you can do about it. If the guy wasn't the one who could become our hero's brother in the future, then his head would already be flying off his shoulders. Jo-sung only squinted as he heard this addressed to him. The man through the window told him to get on his knees and apologize if he didn't want to face security because of his mistake. The ruler did not want to do this very much, Was it necessary? The man is now standing in front of a former military advisor, with whom even the emperor himself reckons. But Yu Sung was very indignant and told him to get ready, because now he was going to the emperor's estate. Immediately after that, the man fell to his knees and began to beg for forgiveness, saying that this would never happen again. Two men clung to him and begged for forgiveness. But the old man was still too angry because now his son is dying, and all because of this bastard. Suddenly, our hero came out into the yard and everyone stared at him in surprise, because they noticed that he had a strange hairstyle. The girls gave the main character a great hairstyle, but it looked a little strange and unusual. Yu Sung asked his son not to untangle his braids because he really likes his hairstyle. Yu Sung immediately turned to his son and asked if he was okay. As soon as Oh Hyun saw the young man, he immediately rushed to him. Oh Hyun began to carefully examine the young master and sneak up on him, asking about his condition. Fortunately, Yu Hyun was fine. And after a second, the man fell on his knees in front of him and began to praise him, saying that his skills had greatly improved. But the main character only looked at him contemptuously, not understanding what nonsense he was saying. After that, he approached the ruler and bowed before him, greeting him. In addition, he called him an older brother. But in fact, our hero was not at all happy to see him. He looked at him sympathetically. Then, the boy asked his father what they were talking about. He assumes that the conversation was about the emperor's estate. Yu Sung tells that he wanted to report this terrible act to the emperor. But our hero did not like this idea very much, because the emperor does not have much time to react to such nonsense. The gray-haired man, of course, listens to his son and says that he seems to have bent his stick, but it still didn't mean that the man could forgive the bastard who attacked his son. A second later, the young gentleman approaches the guy who beat him and asks what his name is. The young man says that he is very happy to meet you and introduces himself. Let the boy be older than him, but in fact, our hero is still his uncle. In fact, it was all untrue and our hero showed hypocrisy. He had been waiting for this day for a long time. After a second, the boy took him by the cheek and started pulling him. He repeated once again that he was his uncle. Joe's son clearly didn't like this, but unfortunately, there was nothing he could do. In fact, our hero hated this bastard, and was very glad that they met. In fact, he knew him from his past life. It was the same one-eyed sword king. This is one of the 6 Orthodox saints who trained him. He was his teacher, but he didn't like him because the man was a true madman, and used his sword like a club just to beat the boy. And even when our hero sincerely asked to stop, the teacher was not going to do it. It seemed as if the teacher was enjoying teaching Jean Vigan with such brutal methods. The teacher was ready to beat the student for any reason. Once he did it because the boy threw away his sword. This man's teaching and upbringing methods were very strict, and because of any delusion, the teacher seemed to just snap at the boy. At such moments, a smile of pleasure appeared on his face. He liked the bullying. And now, when Jo Song asks to take his hands off him, the main character enjoys his helplessness. Yu Hyun's eyes welled up with tears just remembering those moments. Of course, the guy could forget about it and live on, but his body remembers everything. That's why at that moment he froze in place. Tears of happiness appear in Yu Hyun's eyes at the thought that the master psychopath will now pay for everything. After a while, the men went inside and sat down at the table to discuss everything. The atmosphere in the room was quite tense. No one knew how to start a conversation or what to expect next. Our hero breaks the silence. He asks his elder brother why they came here. The man thinks of what excuse he can come up with, because if he tells the truth, Yu Sung will get angry again. The main character assumed that they had come here to discuss the marriage, but Yu Hyun immediately says that he did not agree to him. This shocks even his father. Yu Hyun asks his father to respect his wishes. He has absolutely no time for a wedding. He must kill the servant of chaos. Arranged marriage without the consent of both parties is not a very right thing. Yu Hyun must help the empire by looking after the next generation and the future of their country. And when the father hears that Yu Hyun wants to go beyond Murim's walls, he is shocked. Because outside Murim there are only thugs, bandits, and the poor. It's very dangerous there, so why does the guy want to go there? Martial arts masters have their own life path. That's how they learn, from mistakes and their own experience. In addition, Yu Hyun is sure that Lady Namgoon is also on her own path and would not really want to get married. Our hero is shocked that the ruler is so stupid that he cannot simply play along with him. Therefore, the main character asks his older brother to agree to his proposal. But the older brother wanted to object to this somehow. The old man does not listen to anyone, and confronts them with the fact that they agreed to his proposal. And after that, he gets up and leaves. But before finally leaving, the boy asks Oh Hyun to come to him. And after a moment, Oh Hyun, like a faithful dog, stood next to our hero. He hugged him by the shoulders, and with a creepy expression on his face and a smile. He said that they should go away and talk. The men just looked at each other, not understanding where the boys had gone. But immediately after they left, there was an awkward pause between the men. As soon as the men went outside, Oh Hyun complimented our hero's hairstyle. Oh Hyun compliments the boy and says he looks great. But when Oh Hyun said that his hairstyle was very cute, the young master quickly began to unbraid his hair. The boy noticed that the family loved Yoo Hyun very much. Our hero wants to go back to the conversation. It turns out that he is very interested in Murim. Parabok even knows little-known masters of martial arts, but it is quite normal for beginners to be interested in such. The boy thought for a second about his teachers, who now, most likely, everything was just great. Now our hero wants to find all his teachers and make them go through everything that he went through. The main character is sure that it will be a great experience for them. The man says that the sea has split a little into demonic, orthodox, and non-orthodox clans. But now they are only busy surviving, and there is nothing to worry about. But 10 years later, they will all unite under the beginning of the Servant of Chaos. As expected, there was very little time left. We need to accumulate more spiritual energy and very quickly. And most importantly, you need to take his first student. He is going to get revenge on Joe's son. Very soon, our hero went to practice delivery. He is going to swim a little and exercise in the water. But the boy did not believe at all that his subordinate was worried about him. Suddenly, his sister appears on the shore and says that you should be more attentive to yourself and rest. Huang Zhong immediately notices the female subordinate Ms. Yu Zhong. This woman filled his heart. As soon as the man saw her, he began to breathe nervously and behave strangely. Yu Chong was angry with the subordinate for not stopping the young master from training. The girl asks if our hero understands how dangerous it is in Murima. Their mother died precisely because of the discord in Murima, and they try not to talk about it so as not to touch the past. But just from the mention of it, the girl's tears begin to flow. But even if you remain silent, the wounds will not heal. The young man asks why the girl looks so scared. It doesn't look like her at all. The boy promises her that nothing bad will happen to the Yu clan again. The main character is smiling. His eyes are full of gentleness and confidence. He won't let that happen. The girl looked at her brother, and only now did she realize that the boy had not been a child for a long time. Yu Yung always sees her brother as a little boy, but he is grown up and the girl has to accept that fact. Yu Hyun is a little embarrassed that his sister is acting so strange, as if not as usual. The girl looks him straight in the eyes, but she doesn't look the way she usually does. A warm smile spread across his lips. The boy felt very constrained by such movements of hers. It was actually quite embarrassing. Is this really a family? Does she really feel that way? Unfortunately, in the past life, the young man could not feel this. Thus, a year flew by. Summer was replaced by a golden autumn, after which came a cold winter, which was replaced by a blooming spring, which was later replaced again by a warm summer. All this time our hero continued to tirelessly try and train. Finally, the time has come. During this year he changed and became a man. Now he is ready for battle. Behind him, he hears Huang Zhong's frightened voice telling the young man to be careful because he might fall. Yu Hyun managed to lose a lot of weight, but he still had some sagging skin. After some time, our hero came to his father and said that he would like to go to Anhui. However, Yu Sung is against it because he is worried about his son. But the main character still wants to get there. Yu Hyun wants to go there to train Jo Sung. It seems that the boy was too careless with them, but they are practically family, so credit must be given to his uncle. Even ignoring his father's words, Yu Hyun is still going to go there. Even ignoring his father's words. He simply puts his father in front of the fact, and he does not even have time to say a word. Yu Sung realizes that he will no longer be able to influence his son's decision, but still thinks about how he can stop him. Meanwhile, the young man is already collecting things in his room. The guy can't travel under his real name. No one should recognize him. Finally, Yu Hyun finished packing his things. Now he can be called a free Gene Wigan again. During the trip, he will again use his native name. But as soon as he leaves the room, he falls into a stupor when he sees a bunch of subordinates in the courtyard, and a royal place for him. Huang Chong was also standing outside and greeted the young master. The boy did not understand at all what was happening here. A delegation was assembled here, the task of which was to accompany our hero to Anhui. Huang Zhong is a bit dumbfounded when he realizes that the ruler doesn't seem to have warned the boy that they are also coming with him. Yu Sung is so worried about his son that he sent a whole delegation with him. The image of his father immediately appeared in his head, but the boy quickly got rid of it. This was really a problem because Yu Hyun was going to get the chase ginseng and kill the Servant of Chaos. No one should know about it, but if so many people go with him, it will be difficult to do. If our hero tells about his plan, the father will definitely listen to everyone, and the boy will not be able to explain what is happening. Everyone was already ready to go. Yu-hyun tries to come up with a plan to get rid of this leech named Hwang Jong. Yu-hyun just can't let things not go according to his plan. After a few seconds, the young man had an idea how to avoid this problem. It is already quite late, so the young gentleman suggests resting before leaving. Hwang Chong suggests postponing the trip to tomorrow. Unexpectedly, the guy offers everyone a drink, because they have nowhere to go anyway. Come to think of it, Yu-hyun had never even had a drink with Hwang Jung, even though the man had always worked hard and protected him. Hwang Jung was deeply moved by these words. Tears even came to his eyes. But, in reality, these were all insincere words, and just part of Yu-hyun's devious plan. Night has already come. The men were still in the brothel drinking. At this time, a young lady and her servant were walking down the street. The subordinate was going to inform the others about her arrival, but she said that it was not necessary. Information has already reached Yu Jung that her brother is leaving. Previously, the woman constantly turned her younger brother into a real beauty, but now he is not so funny. Yu Jung asked who the subordinate reminds Yu Hyun. Of course, he reminds her of his older sister. Meanwhile, the guys still continue to drink and discuss their problems. Yu Jung tells the subordinates to go rest, and she will now go about her business. The woman realized that the young lady wanted to wait for him alone again, so she wanted to stay with her. But Yu Jung insisted that the woman go and rest. A full moon shone in the sky. Finally, the main character was able to carry out his plan and get rid of the problems. Hwang Chong, meanwhile, was already sleeping on the floor. He was too drunk to understand anything. This was what Yu Hyun's plan was all about. Suddenly, Hwang Jung wakes up abruptly and starts shouting something. The boy is already beginning to think that his plan has gone wrong. But fortunately, the man talked in his sleep. It turns out that the guy added poison to the subordinate's alcohol. It dissipates internal energy, so by morning he won't be able to move a finger. The boy remembers how the emperor's doctor used to make masks for him, because his skin was in terrible condition after losing weight. It was then that he received this poison from the doctor. He gave it so that Yu Hyun could use it in case the opponent was too strong for him. The main character was once again convinced that Yang Xiao was a very helpful old man. Our hero hoped for Hwang Jung's understanding, because he is doing this to protect the Yu clan and Murim. And now, when the young man is about to leave, he meets his sister on the road, who is upset that he didn't even say goodbye to her. It seems that the main character definitely did not expect to see his sister here. After only a second, Yu Jung rushes to his brother and hugs him tightly. The girl asks him to return quickly and be careful. She reminds that if the boy has a really hard time, he can go back at any moment. The girl says that she and her father will always wait for him. The main character is very pleased to hear these words. He can finally understand what family means. After they had said their goodbyes, our hero went to his horse to set off. It was the same unusual lightning-fast horse that the emperor had given them. He stood out with his eye color. The young man could never have thought that he would sit on such a horse. And so, the boy looks at his native clan for the last time, preparing to go on a long journey, which will be full of adventures. But he has no time for long goodbyes. You have to pull yourself together. And so, just a second later, Yu Hyun sets off for new adventures. All night he drives through forests and fields. The boy himself does not notice that the dawn has already come. He arrived at the Namgun clan's territory. Finally, they and his faithful horse arrived at the right place. The boy headed to one of the huts that stood on the edge of the settlement. It turns out that it was a canteen, so the boy immediately ordered food because he was tired after the journey. Yu Hyun ordered many different dishes and ate them all. The boy pays the landlord to bring him all the ginseng gatherers and hunters. Meanwhile, news reached the blonde stranger that a chased ginseng had been found in Anhui province, and as soon as a man hears about it, he is immediately going to get this plant for himself. He goes in search of her. And so, after some time, the gatherer and hunters were already standing in front of him. The man immediately asked the boy what was the purpose of his visit to their home, to their settlements. Residents whispered among themselves. They thought our hero looked very suspicious and thought he was a robber. The protagonist wanted to introduce himself, but remembered that no one should know his name. Then, he called himself Jin Vegan and lied that he was working for the Yu clan. The boy had come here to find something for the emperor's former military advisor. He heard that there is a stone here, from which a crimson light comes. The locals listened carefully to him and tried to understand what exactly he meant. In fact, when the boy first heard it from his teachers, he thought it was delusional. He could not believe that there was a stone that emitted crimson light. One of the locals seemed to understand what the boy meant, although he wasn't sure. A man saw a similar stone in his youth, when he was lost in the mountains. At night he met stones that shone like a red ray of the sun. The boy immediately caught on to these words. He had to find out where it was. The man said that it was about the peak of the pagoda. But after a second the man says that the boy should not go there, because there is a fortress of 9 dragons. Mountain robbers live in this fortress. This is a brutal gang that has been around for a very long time. Rumor has it that some of them even have martial arts skills. Now the boy is sure that the ginseng is there, because no one would think to look for bandits in the fortress. The main character is very happy that he was finally able to find at least some information about it. He grabs the man's hand and sincerely asks him to take him to this place, but the man doubts. The boy is begging for help. If the man cannot take him there, let him at least show him the way. The man looks into the eyes of this young man and realizes that they are full of desperation and desire. Soon, the man can't hold back and agrees to take the boy to the place where the peak is visible. But he asks the boy to promise that they will turn back immediately if something goes wrong. Thus they set off. And so, after some time, they come to the right place. They are standing on the edge of a cliff. You can really see the peak from here. Although this river looks small, it is very deep, so you should not try to cross it. Yuan asks the man where exactly he saw the stone. The man points with his finger to the approximate place. He did not see the stone. Soon the sun will set, and he will be able to see it himself. Then, they sat down on the edge of the rock and began to wait for the sunset. Yuan was very focused and looking beyond the horizon. The sun was already starting to set. A beautiful landscape opened up from here, which took your breath away. Our hero is already waiting for the sun to set behind the horizon. He wants to see that bright light. And finally, he sees the long-awaited crimson light. The young man immediately wants to go there to get the stone. Meanwhile, the night has almost come. The main character sends the man home and tells him that he needs to get home before it gets dark, because the man can be caught by robbers, and this is not safe. There may be masters out there that a boy can't defeat. Yuan repays the man for his help by giving away his pendant. After that, he bows and says goodbye. After a second, the young man deftly disappears. Our hero decided to get to the right place through the river, because no one would have thought that someone would risk doing so. The boy had an advantage in the water. After some time, Yuan reached the 9-dragon fortress. He hears the voices of the middle. Someone says that it is necessary to sell people who you did not catch at the border as soon as possible. Our hero assumes that these bastards robbed several settlements. But that shouldn't worry him now. Now the priority is virgin ginseng. The main character uses your energy to check if enemies are nearby. It will also help him find the stone. Suddenly, just at that moment, a man comes out of the room. He pulls the girl behind him, holding her by the hair. A second later, he throws her to the ground and begins mercilessly kicking her and calling her names. Yuan is shocked by what he saw. Hatred for this bastard awakens in him. Suddenly, the boy sees a little girl watching this and crying. It seems that this bastard was beating her mother. But this does not cause any pity in the man, and he wants to go to the girl. But the woman grabs his leg and tries to restrain him. Pascuda will now show this woman how much a real person lives. Anger filled our hero, but he perfectly understood that he had to restrain himself. Emotions should not take control of him. He remembered the words of the masters, who said that the boy should not interfere with anything until he regained his strength. Even in those situations when it comes to justice and salvation. The old man can only watch. It's all for the sake of saving the Murim. He hated his teachers for those words. Rage filled him when he saw what the bastard was nursing. He grips the grass tightly in his hand to control his anger. Only this time he will turn a blind eye to it. But as soon as our hero gets a chase ginseng, he will return here to take everyone's head off. Suddenly, the boy stops when he hears the unbearable crying of the girl. She calls her mother. Gene Wiggins seems to be addressing himself and says that one must move along the path that he chooses for himself. The guy doesn't understand how in such a situation he can just stand aside and watch it. But if Yuan continues to ignore such brutal crimes, why save Murim at all? Then he'd better destroy it himself. The girl continues to stand and cry loudly, while the mother screams unbearably and asks this bastard to stop and not harm the child. But the scoundrel doesn't care, and with a disgusting smile he stretches his hands towards the girl. But, unexpectedly, the man bleeds and dies. It was the handiwork of Yuan, who complained about getting blood on his clothes. The girl froze in place and looked intently at our hero. The girl thinks that the boy came here to save them, but he explains that he was just passing by. A second later, the mother rushes to her little girl and hugs her. She is afraid that this stranger will also harm them. The main character does not understand why she has such a reaction, if he literally just saved their lives. The woman is very afraid that he will also harm them, and when the guy reaches out to them with his hand, he squints hard, hugging his daughter tighter. But surprisingly, the guy does nothing wrong. he just put his hand on the woman's shoulder. They didn't have time at all, so they had to get up and act faster. Suddenly, another scoundrel came out from the neighboring room, who saw our hero and did not understand who he was. The old man quickly dealt with a few more freaks, and told the woman and the child that they should go inside before anyone noticed them. When they got inside, the boy threw their corpses on the floor, complaining that they were too heavy. And when the boy looked up, he saw many people huddled in a corner. They were all scared. These people clearly did not trust our hero, but the woman confirmed that he had come to save them. Yuan asks to listen to him and promises that he will get everyone out of here. To begin with, the guy had to gather information. He asked the people if they knew how many robbers were in the fort. There were about 50 robbers. This was a serious problem, because martial arts masters could also be among them. People hope that soldiers have already gathered around the fortress and have come to save them. But this is not the case. The guy came alone. The only thing our hero can do is buy time to escape, and everything else depends on the people themselves. The woman thinks they're going to die anyway, so it's better to take the risk. Then he puts the woman in charge and says that she will lead the frightened people. After some time, one of the robbers enters the room to drive out the kidnapped people, but does not see anyone except his 2 dead comrades. When he looks up, he sees frightened people clinging to the wall. He tries to find out from them what happened here. But the bastard does not have time to conclude anything, because after a moment a sharp sword pierces his neck. Of course, it was the work of our hero. After that, Yuan peeked out of the room to survey the situation. He understood that this was not all, because there was another problem ahead of them. The watchtower. There was definitely a guard in this tower, but he seemed a bit sleepy. Our hero used his energy, and after a second, the blue wave was lightning fast towards the guard. And right in front of the tower, this mysterious, incomprehensible thing stopped. It turns out that it was not just energy, but the main character. He was ready for battle. The guard clearly did not expect to see anyone here. He did not understand what kind of fool it was. Now our hero will teach him a real lesson and send him to hell, as he deserved. A second later, he hits this tower and its base begins to crack and crumble. And just a moment later, you start to fall, and the man who was on top screams loudly. It turns out that you and your husband have already fallen straight into an abyss from which he will definitely not be able to get out. People silently watched what was happening, and could not believe that they would be able to save themselves now. They remembered the words of our hero that the destroyed tower would be a signal for them. Then, the woman quickly commanded them that it was time to run. Meanwhile, the boy quickly returns to the room where he left the dead robbers. A young man runs there with a torch, and after a second, without any doubts or regrets, he throws it inside. The house quickly goes up in bright hot fire. It will not be possible to save him. Now it's time to make a little fuss. He leaves the room while it continues to burn. At this time, the robbers are peacefully sleeping in their house. But suddenly, one of them wakes up from a terrible smell, which immediately hits his nose. And when a man looks into the open door, he is shocked because he sees a strong fire. The man jumps up and runs to the house while the others try to wake up and figure out what happened. But as soon as the man ran out of the room, he was immediately thrown back there by a strong blow. No one understood what was happening here, and the robbers simply looked into the doorway. Soon, there they saw a stranger holding a torch. He was our hero. The boy did not tell them his name, but only introduced himself as the arsonist. The robbers, of course, began to scream when they realized that a rat had made its way to them. Our hero tried to escape while these scum tried to catch him. Although there were more robbers, our hero still did not give up. He tried to quickly find his way in an unfamiliar space. Yuan understood that he would not engage in a fight with all of them. When they are alone, they are weak, but he definitely won't be able to defeat such a number. But there was no time at all, because the robbers had already found the boy and ran straight to him. If the boy had fortification and energy absorption, he would definitely defeat them with ease. Suddenly, one of the robbers jumps out right in front of the boy and swings a spear at him. Our hero understands that he has no choice. We need to act urgently. The young man dodges, and a second later delivers a powerful blow to his enemy. From such a strong blow, the man simply could not stay on his feet and fell. The advantage is definitely not on the boy's side, but the only thing he can do is fight. He decides to send spiritual energy into his legs to move faster. A plan comes to mind. Yuan is going to set a trap for them. At the same time, 2 guards stand at the entrance to the fortress. Suddenly, a small pebble falls to one of them, which attracts his attention. A man bends down to pick up a pebble, and when he looks up, he sees something terrible. The guards see that a fire has started in the fortress, and think that it may have been attacked by enemies. In addition, the fire was quite strong. The man and the fortune teller had nothing to do, so they just looked at each other, looking for a solution. They realized that the enemy got inside precisely because of their carelessness, and if the boss finds out about it, they will be in trouble. Therefore, the men ran to help their comrades. At the same time, some rustling was heard in the bushes. It turns out that there were prisoners waiting for the guards to leave. It's time to run. After a second, everyone ran headlong to the exit. The woman turned around for the last time and mentally thanked the soldier for saving her. After a moment, all the captives ran out of this terrible place, which they associated only with pain and suffering. Meanwhile, our hero almost ran out of energy and was getting slower and slower. It is necessary to distract the robbers so that people have a chance to escape. That's why the guy can't give up. He must do it for the sake of the people. At this time, he just collided with a very fast opponent. The man was very strong, and with just one of his blows, the boy almost fell, but managed to land softly. A stocky, one-eyed man asked him in a harsh and unpleasant voice, "Who the hell is he?" But Yuan doesn't answer this question at all. He only silently studies his opponent with his eyes. Soon, other robbers are attracted to this bastard. Now there are 5 of them, and all of them are quite aggressive. From their energy, the girl immediately understands that they all studied martial arts. The young man answers that he came here alone. This provokes ridicule from the stocky man, and immediately after that the robbers rush to him. The bastards surrounded the boy from all sides and surrounded him. There was nowhere to run. The guy understood that things were bad, but it was necessary to come up with something urgently. After a second, he proudly raised his head and said that he would handle these scum himself. He doesn't need help. The entire calculation was that they would not be scared and simply retreat. But, unfortunately, this plan did not work. On the contrary, it only interested their head. Yuan was already very exhausted because this bastard's punch had hurt him badly. The young man was completely alone and did not know what to do in such a situation. After a second, the leader turned to the other robbers and asked why they were standing idle. If they don't go and start the fire right now, everything will burn. After a moment, they ran to carry out the order. The protagonist continued to stand motionless and look into the eyes of his enemy. Standing before him was Guak Sosan, the head of the 9-dragon fortress. But our hero was not going to introduce himself to him in return. Guak praised our hero and said that he has courage and strength, after which he offered to work for him. Although it sounded silly, the boy had to bide his time so that people could escape as far as possible. A second later, he sat down on the ground right in front of them and asked if this was an offer to become a mountain robber. The man confirms this, because it is very difficult to find good people for this position. But the young man is strong and brave, so he fits. Guak continues to stand his ground and bids him step in, and then he turns a blind eye to the incident. Our hero doesn't answer, but when the thugs start saying they want to kill him for ignoring their boss, the guy says it's a great idea. In fact, Yuan was only taking his time to regain some energy, but after a second he stood up and said that the wolf would never serve the mutt. These words outraged the man. He felt humiliated. Then the boy started teasing the man and challenging him to a one-on-one fight. When Guak realized that he would not be able to win the boy over to his side, he ordered the bandits to finish him off. And so, after a second, the scoundrels rushed to him. Yuan got into a fighting stance. One of the enemies starts an attack, but the boy dodges. A little more, and he could be hurt. That bastard cut off his bandages on his face. Most of all, Jean Vigan was angry with their leader, who sneakily hides behind the backs of his subordinates. The enemies thought that the boy was young, but when they tore off his bandages they thought otherwise, because his skin was in bad condition. But instead, the main character calls his enemy a freak. He clearly did not expect this. Our hero at least looks like a person, different from these scum. These words angered his enemies even more. The man swings, preparing to strike at Yuan, but he already had another plan. The main character quickly jumps and kicks away his enemy's sword. The boy thought that this would be enough, but everything turned out to be wrong. The enemy was going to attack him with a fist. Unfortunately, the guy's plan didn't work, and he got punched right in the stomach. As a result, he flew back a few meters, but was able to get back on his feet. There were too many enemies. They approached from all sides. Abominations continue to attack him from all sides, and the young man has no time to rest and refresh. Gene Wiggin dodges all the blows, but one he seems to miss. He sees a fist in front of his face. Just a second later, that powerful fist hits him right in the face. The force of the impact was so great that he flew several meters back at high speed. The enemies had to admit that the boy was quite good at martial arts if he could last so long without energy. In fact, the main character had energy, but now he has spent it all. The boy's problem was that he underestimated his enemies, and they turned out to be experienced warriors. A young man cannot protect anyone in such a state. It seems it was better to just pass by. But our hero immediately forgets about it because, after all, he managed to save people. The protagonist cannot die here even if he loses the chaste ginseng. Gene Wiggin is not going to give up. He takes a deep breath. Guac thought our hero was brave, but now concludes that he is just a fool. A second later, he orders his underlings to kill this loser, and they immediately pounce on him. After the boy strengthened his center of gravity, the body became like a reed floating on a river. He thinks to himself that these bastards will remember this technique. This technique was called the 8 Drunken Immortal Steps. Yuan acted like a dancer on the battlefield. Unfortunately, the main character is still very far from the form he had in his past life. The enemies cursed, not understanding what kind of moves this fool was using. It seemed that they were even frightened by it. But there is absolutely nothing to be surprised about, because this is all just the beginning. This martial arts technique is so fast that even light cannot catch up with it. A second later, the brave boy rushes straight at their leader, Guac, using the shadowless flight technique. The man was no joke when he saw such power, but he braced himself for his blow. A second later, the men collided, and Gene Vegan punched him in the face, but he thought he only touched him lightly. The one-eyed bastard turned to look at the boy again. He was wounded. Blood was visible on his face. But Gene Vegan didn't wait for them to catch up with him, and deliberately fell off the cliff. The boy was perfectly aware that he was no match for them now, so he chose the tactic of retreating. The cliff is quite high, so the boy does not think that this bastard will dare to jump after him. And in the end, our hero decided to be completely fearless, and showed this scoundrel the middle finger. This gesture irritated the man even more. He felt humiliated, even such a fool as our hero. Now Gene Vegan has a personal goal. He will definitely return for the heads of these scoundrels. He remembered them. The robbers run to the edge of the abyss to watch the fall of our hero. They didn't expect him to do that. Guac orders them to gather a group and find this bastard's corpse. To relieve his anger, he wants to flay Gene Wigan. Suddenly, another subordinate comes running to him, who has some news. The guy reports in a trembling voice that only 3 burnt corpses were found in the building where they kept the prisoners. It immediately dawns on Guac that this mysterious stranger is involved. It was he who helped people and won time for them. Now even removing the skin from it will not be enough. He wants the guy to pay for it. The head orders that every corner be searched if necessary, but they must bring all the prisoners back. Absolutely. All of them. Meanwhile, our hero still continued his flight from the cliff. The lad had only one attempt to land successfully. Gene Wigan should land as softly as possible. To do this, the main character must correctly group in order to receive a minimum of injuries. Jean Vigan takes a full chest of air and, a moment later, he falls into the same river with a loud splash. It was necessary to swim up urgently, because the young man could crash on the bottom of the river. But suddenly the boy just stops in the middle of the river. It just stops moving down. Gene Wigan casts his gaze down to understand the reason for his sudden stop. But when he looks, he realizes that he got into a real whirlpool. The boy began to be sucked inside, and he simply could not understand why things were not going according to his plans. The vortex began to pull the boy hard, and he knew very well that he would not be able to get out of here so easily. Therefore, the boy had nothing else to do but simply trust the flow. So Gene Wigan did not resist. The current itself decided where to carry him. And so, after a few minutes, the young man emerged in another place. The current really helped him. As soon as the boy emerged, he began to spit and cough water. Fortunately, he managed to survive. After Gene Vegan more or less came to his senses, he just wanted to rest and forget about all the ginseng. He lay down on his back in the water. But when the young gentleman opened his eyes, he noticed that the spiritual energy reacted by itself. After a moment, the boy ordered his energy to find the chaste ginseng. She flew in different directions. He felt that it was the power of chaste ginseng. But the main character still could not understand where this plant is. Gene Wigan concludes that he fell from the waterfall, but he can't figure out exactly where he is. He is afraid to imagine how far he has been carried. Our hero almost lost consciousness when he saw a plant on the shore of the lake, from which blue energy emanated. The old man immediately understood that it was the same chaste ginseng that he had been looking for so long. Tears flowed from happiness. Gene Wigan now regrets not asking the poor scum for more details. But in any case, our hero was incredibly glad to have found him. The guy decided not to waste time, and as soon as he got close to him, he started digging. Earth and dirt flew in different directions, and so finally the young man dug a hole deep enough to get this long-awaited fruit. A second later, he already had a ginseng in his hands. Most likely he is called chaste because he resembles a baby. The main character began to carefully examine every centimeter of ginseng. Jean Vigan prided himself on having done it faster than the Chaos Servant, so now his plans were at an end. Now our hero is going to enjoy this plant. Finally, he makes the long-awaited bite. There is a coolness in his letter. A bitter aftertaste of ginger appears on the tip of the tongue. Ginseng is sweet and refreshing, filled with spiritual energy. A second later, Gene Vegan takes another bite. This energy was very dense, but the boy wanted to absorb it all. Now that he is full of energy and strength, he is ready to take revenge on that bastard Guac. The previously useless boy from Huayan Prefecture is back. Meanwhile, the delegation went on the trail of our hero, and came across the settlement in which he introduced himself under a different name. Huang Zhong was very shocked by this. The man could not imagine where the young man had gone. The man remembered that day. He drank all night, and in the morning he slept soundly. But his sleep was disturbed by the angry Yu Sung, who opened the door with shouts. The old man immediately rushed to Huang Zhong and started beating him for not doing his duty and just falling asleep. The head threatened to kill him if he wanted to sleep so badly. Yu Chong, meanwhile, tried to calm him down. After a second, the man looks at all the empty bottles he drank during the night, and then he remembers how the young man constantly poured alcohol on him, telling him to drink it to the bottom. Only then did the man realize what had happened. The old man threatens to kill this brat again. Now he is held back by his daughter and the doctor, but suddenly, Yu Sung just falls to the floor. Everyone was immediately frightened because they thought that he had died. But, fortunately, this turned out not to be the case. Huang Zhong hears a local saying that this horse has very unusual eyes. And this horse was very picky, and even ate dog food. Then Huang Zhong quickly ran to the stable and turned to the boy who was consulting there. It turns out that he confused this guy with our hero. Huang Zhong no longer knew where to look for the young master. It seemed as if he was losing his mind. Then the man ran up to the boy again and asked where this horse came from. Then, the boy told him absolutely everything. And Huang Zhong was shocked when he heard about the mountain robbers. The most terrible scenarios of what these scoundrels could do to the young gentleman appeared in the man's head. Without waiting for anyone, the man immediately ran to save the main character. The boy just silently looked after this stranger, but he suddenly stopped. Huang Zhong ran back to the stables and started jumping in different directions and running, and after a second he simply collapses from exhaustion and nerves. The man turned back because he did not know where this pagoda peak was. Meanwhile, the captured people who managed to escape ran through the cold, snowy forest. They were afraid of every little noise. Suddenly, a bearded man came out from behind a tree and told about a short way to the village. The frightened people immediately ran there. But finally this man asked if they had seen the boy in the pounds. Then it immediately became clear to the woman that this man knew something about their savior. Meanwhile, the robbers continue to look for our hero, who seems to have fallen through the ground. Their boss will be pissed if they don't find this bastard and bring him in. Then, the robbers decide to split into groups. 5 will go down the river and the others will search near the waterfall. Suddenly, one of the robbers notices something strange. There's a guy standing under the waterfall who says that if something went wrong, he could die. He was our hero. No one could understand where he came from. Gene Vegan was just in time for such a meeting, because he himself was going to find these bastards. But it seems that none of the robbers recognized him. They just looked at him strangely. And after the boy ate ginseng, he changed a lot. His skin became much better and he began to look attractive. But the robbers still could not understand who was standing in front of them. Jean Vigan orders them to undress and give him dry clothes because he's been in pain. Immediately after that, the robbers point their guns at him. The main character once again tells them to undress or he will use force. But the scoundrels did not understand anything. So our hero kicked one of them hard on the head. His eyes were filled with anger and rage. He wanted revenge. Seeing how strong this stranger was, the robbers were cursed on the spot. Because of such a blow, this bastard's clothes also got wet. Should have been more careful. After a second, he turns his gaze to the robbers, who are all trembling in fear. It was really difficult to recognize our hero, because he became a real handsome man. With a predatory smile, he asks who to undress next. The men didn't have to ask much, because after a few seconds, they took off all their clothes because they didn't want to be beaten. The boy also took a weapon from one of them. He thought it would be easier for her, but it didn't matter. Our hero did not wait long and swung his spear. And after a second, the protagonist mercilessly chops off the head of one of them. The robbers begin to tremble with fear, but cannot move. The men beg to take pity on them, but the young man is not going to do it. Jean Vigan is not going to spare them, because he promised that he will take the head of each of them. The robbers begin to tremble even more, not understanding to whom he promised this. First of all, the main character promised it to himself. Only now did it dawn on the bastards that they had to run for their lives. But it was already too late. Parabok cut their heads off their shoulders with one light movement. Now is the time to go hunting, because these robbers are animals, not people. Jean Vigan was very upset that he had just changed his clothes, and already stained them with blood. Parubok came closer to the river to wash off this dirt. But when he looked into the water, he was shocked, because he did not understand whether it was a beautiful face looking at him. And only now did it come to our hero that he became like this because of chaste ginseng. Our hero was very happy and couldn't help but admire himself. Now, with such a beautiful face, no one would definitely think that he is adopted. Suddenly, somewhere above, the boy hears loud screams and noise. It turns out that the robbers have already caught up with the unfortunate people. The bastard was beating a decrepit man who had previously taken our hero to the peak of the pagoda. Grandpa is already badly beaten, and all he can do is cover his hands and say that he didn't talk to that guy. Suddenly, someone addresses the man. A young man climbed the mountain, but again no one recognized him, because he had radically changed his appearance. Suddenly, the boy just sat down on the ground and started picking up snow. The robbers did not understand what kind of weirdo he was and what he was doing. Did he really want to die? Then, one of the scoundrels turned to the stranger and came a little closer. Unexpectedly, our hero threw this snowball right at one of the robbers. The scoundrel didn't even blink an eye before his friend was already lying on the ground. Soon the real snowball attack begins. Gene Wiggin absolutely nailed all these bastards. The main character moved like lightning. He was approaching his enemies. The robber was incredibly scared and seemed to be on the spot. And so, the boy found himself at the top, right above a pile of these scoundrels. But it was already too late for these fools to run away. They wasted their time. As soon as our hero landed, he instantly scattered all the enemies. The robbers were still shocked and did not understand how to confront their enemy. Gene Wiggin was proud of himself. He had defeated absolutely all his enemies and now felt exalted. Now he could cut through the clouds and cut through the moon. Jin Vegan said that this sword technique is the Wudan clan's moon destruction. The main character tries to hint to these bastards about who he is. When the boy looks away, he sees a wounded grandfather who has been badly beaten. It was the same grandfather who helped Gene Wiggin find Pagoda Peak. He was going to punish whoever did it. The scoundrel began to make excuses and swear that he had done nothing to this grandfather. But the main character was not even going to listen to this delusion. He just swung his weapon. Gene Vegan killed the bastard in a moment. He looked at the grandfather, who was on the snow red from his blood. The boy approaches his grandfather and puts him on his lap. The man is barely breathing, but Grandpa looks very beat up. Our hero asked him to return to the village so that nothing happened. Why didn't he listen? The main character will try to release some energy on his wine and heal. It may not be a complete cure, but he should get better. For first aid, it was pretty good. The boy turns to those present and asks who will be able to carry the old man. Soon, some men throw him on their backs. Our hero tells people to go forward and not look back, but it is important to be slow and careful. Parubok is sure that no bastards will pursue these people anymore, because from now on, he's going to unleash the wrath of the gods on these pitiful beasts. Thus, the boy goes to their clan. The guards, meanwhile, do not understand where the insert in the middle of winter came from. Suddenly, they see a strong whirlwind in front of them, and do not understand what kind of unknown is approaching them. As it turned out, it was the main character who didn't even let them think, but immediately killed on the spot. The boy felt no pity for these creatures. He was driven only by a sense of revenge. The fact that he rids the world of such bastards gave him pleasure. When our hero entered the courtyard, he took a deep breath and shouted the name of their leader, Guak So-san. The guy shouts loudly to call this bastard. He came for his head, but only subordinates listened to his cries. There is a limit to awakening that depends on the amount of internal energy, but spiritual energy is different. She possesses the power of life, pierces and destroys everything in her path. A second later, the main character cuts his enemy in half with ease. He's going to kill all the bastards who want to get in his way. Gene Vegan is moving forward quickly, developing absolutely everyone he sees in his path. Seeing such power, other robbers begin to tremble before him in fear, because they understand that they will not be able to win. The young man sees that these scumbags have already started to fear him, so now it's not a problem. Suddenly, a bunch of shots fly at our hero, which he easily dodges. Soon, the very man for whom the boy had come here appeared in the yard. And the enemies of our hero surrounded him, so he will no longer be able to escape. Parubok is very glad that the head came to see him personally. From the outside, it looked as if the head was too afraid and brought ordinary hunters here. But it should not have been done, because in this way he would only be able to gain a little time. Gene Vegan reminded this bastard that he would not be able to stop his death. And now, the young man is ready to deliver the last blow, when suddenly he hears a very familiar voice. Huang Chong enters the courtyard, followed by the delegation. The man orders to kill all mountain robbers, and after a moment, a real battle begins between the men. Our hero watches the man carefully and admits that he is a pretty good fighter. This was the true escort of the Yu clan. Guaxo-san ordered his subordinates to stop the enemies at any cost, even at the cost of their own lives. And while there was a real fight, the man decided to take advantage of the moment and run away. Our hero did not allow this to happen. Guac runs away from the battlefield, hoping no one notices him. But all this time, the main character followed him and said that he had nowhere to run because he was already on the verge of death. This guy still hasn't recognized our hero and doesn't understand why he's chasing him. Then, the boy again smiles widely and shows him the middle finger. And only after that, the man realizes who is standing in front of him. But he does not understand how the guy was able to change in such a short period of time. But the young man did not reveal the details, and simply said that he ate a mystical plant. Guac realized that he was definitely in trouble because he had a martial artist in front of him. The man realizes that he will definitely lose. So he falls to his knees in front of him and begins to beg for mercy. He is trembling with fear. But the young man does not even want to listen to these words. This bastard has done a lot of bad things all his life. Kidnapped children and women, robbed ordinary people, and absolutely nothing stopped this beast before his crimes. The main character says that such a thing cannot be forgiven, so he sentences him in the name of heaven. And after a second, the boy decapitates this bastard. His death was very simple, even considering how much suffering he brought to other people throughout his life. Soon the boy is approached by Huang Zhong, who asks if he is all right. The man understands that this warrior was very angry with the robbers. The man asks this stranger if he has seen the young gentleman here. Huang Zhong begins to list the young master's worst qualities in order to get to know him. He says that he has never heard of manners and is very stubborn. For a second, our hero has the idea to hide this scoundrel here as well. The main character was very angry with his subordinate for such words, but he tried to joke. It wasn't difficult for them to stand up to the gang of dragons, and the boy handled them all by himself. Although his methods were a little cruel, there is no need to punish him for his crimes. The subordinates asked our hero to go back, because his father is very worried about him. But it's not time yet. The guy has to wait for this cursed servant to appear and kill him on the spot. Suddenly, he sees a rope hanging in his hand. Parubku immediately understood why she was needed. The man wanted to tie him up, but he tried not to show it. Yuan started to run away, but the subordinate skillfully grabbed him with a rope because he was a former inspector of the Central Intelligence Agency. After that, he sharply pulled the rope towards him. He warned that he would not hold back. Those present are shocked that the young man achieved such results. Everyone was shocked to see that Yuan was superior to Huang Zhong in fighting skills. It seems that even the man himself did not expect this from him. The main character hit the underling directly in the chest. But that was not all. Behind him he felt another one. Someone threw something wooden at the boy. It was one of his subordinates. He apologized, but he had orders to do so. Perhaps it seemed a little dishonest, but they all have to fulfill their purpose. Huang Chong got into a fighting stance and prepared for a fight. Meanwhile, our hero was also ready for her. He was surrounded by his own subordinates, who, despite everything, were going to send him home. Suddenly, the same old man whom he saved earlier turned to the young man. It turns out that the grandfather came here to thank the boy for saving his life. The old man's son also came here, thanking the boy for saving his father. It was very unusual for the young man to hear words of thanks addressed to him. Grandfather wanted to thank him, so he gathered all his will into a fist and followed the heavenly squad. Grandfather is sure that those who were also stolen are very grateful to our hero. The main character saved not only the prisoners themselves, but also their families. At this time, while the boy was distracted by his guests, his subordinates had already tied him tightly with a rope. After that, they put him in a cart and went home. The young man shouted all the way, asking to let him go, claiming that in his hands is the peace and tranquility of the Murim. But the man did not take his words seriously. The boy had planned to avoid the subordinate until he met the head of chaos, but it seems it wasn't that easy. Huang will take care of the young master's comfort, while he can take a nap. A second later, the man presses on his neck, interrupting Paul in mid-sentence. And after a second, the young man falls unconscious. The coachman notes that the young man has a very childlike face. It's amazing that he managed to deal with the bandits himself. But the man asks not to mention the young master when he will tell someone about the destruction of the dragon gang. Because the more famous the name of the master is, the more attention he will attract. And because of this, problems may appear. A warrior riding next to him praised Huang because he was indeed a good bodyguard. Instead of Ivan's real name, they are going to use the name he used to call himself, Gene Wiggin. At this time, the young man continued to sleep soundly. Meanwhile, the servant of chaos came to the right place to take the ginseng. But he was already gone. The chaste ginseng should have belonged to the young master, but it is simply not there. The head was no longer in control of his emotions. The atmosphere around became so heavy that it was difficult for people to breathe. But the head did not care about anything except this plant. Soon it calmed down a bit, and people could breathe again. The man stood up and said that there was a robber here. The situation at the Golden Estate leaves much to be desired, so he must return and help the young owner. And he entrusts the search for the plant to Manhwa. And if this bastard has already eaten the ginseng, he orders his stomach to be cut open, but the plant to be brought back. He orders his entire family, friends and friends' families to be killed. It was necessary to destroy everyone who was in any way connected with this person. Meanwhile, the cart was already returning home. But Yuan wasn't happy about that because he lost his chance to kill the servant right where the ginseng was growing and save Murim. And then he would be able to spend all his remaining years in luxury and wealth. The guy yells at his subordinate for missing his chance, all because of him. It turns out that the head decided to personally come to Anhui to see his son. In any case, the boy stole the ginseng from them and achieved his goal, and there will still be a chance to kill that scoundrel. He needs a second spiritual being. A 1,000-year-old shell. Finally, they arrive at the right place. Huang thinks that this is our hero's first time in such a big city. It was the capital of Anhui, Hefei. After he left that horrible world of chaos, the whole world for him was limited to training. And only now is Yuan able to see the real world in all its colors. People on the street are engaged in trade. Each of them has its own life. Others sell food, shoppers walk the streets, and all people are different from each other. Everyone has their own life. Huang is about to untie the young man, but asks him not to run away. The boy was very happy when he was freed from the rope, because there was very little space in it. His eyes are drawn to the inscription, Imperial Gate. This is the entrance to the Namgun clan. The young man was curious about what was inside, and he headed there. But unexpectedly, the guard held out his sword to him and ordered him to stop. They did not allow them to go inside, until suddenly a familiar voice was heard. His father, accompanied by guards, was walking towards him. The boy sighed and smiled at the extent to which his father did not know how to hide his emotions. All the fears were visible on his face. The main character extends his arms for a hug, but the father walks past and approaches Huang. "Yu-sung, you obviously didn't recognize your son and immediately lashed out at your subordinate for deceiving him." But the man tries with all his might to explain that this is the young man. For a second, the gray-haired man breaks through and looks at the young man standing next to him. But then he starts pushing his subordinate again and telling him not to fool him, but to bring his son. Yuan decided to take matters into his own hands and act. He called this man father, which caused a look of surprise. The man must have fallen into a stupor. He looked with eyes full of hope and surprise at the young man, who was not at all like his son. But when the young man smiled, everything became clear to him. He dropped his subordinate and quickly ran to his son. But the chapter was interested in the question of what and why he did to his face. News had already reached the ruler that it was the work of a man named Jean Vigan. But in fact, young Mr. Yu managed it himself. The man was very surprised that the boy could handle a whole bunch of robbers by himself. This information was accurate. Moreover, when they tried to take the young man away, he said that he did not want to, and began to resist. The son still didn't believe it, and was angry with the head of the heavenly squad for talking nonsense in front of his father. But the man insisted that it was true. They made every effort for it. Suddenly, the father ticks and calls his son short-sighted, but he does not understand why. The ruler perfectly recognized the strength of our hero, and especially from the moment when he lost weight. The father says that his denial of this fact is his lack of quality. From now on, the husband will decide the issue of marriage himself, and no one has the right to interfere in it. Meanwhile, our hero, his father and sister gathered at one table. The boy clearly did not like that they had decided to drink early in the morning. Suddenly, the father asks his son to take the state exam, but he does not understand why he does not want to. Yuan almost got separated from his family and is not going to repeat his mistakes again. A man intervenes in their conversation. He says that the brother will respond with a strict military order if he takes a military post. No matter what talent he possesses, the most he can achieve with such training is the position of general. Yuan has no idea what his sister has come up with, but asks to continue. But the father does not understand what it leads to. If the boy meets a good teacher and works out all his skills, he will reach great heights and go down in history as the savior of the state. Yujung already had the option of a teacher. Namgun Chang-sung, Sword King, and former head of the Namgun family. It's obvious that anyone would want to get the martial arts gene, even the one who defeated the mountain robbers himself. Unlike the 9 schools, they give the impression of being strong supporters of earthly existence, but they are nevertheless one of the most popular families over the years. If the boy uses the family name for Namgun, then he will have more chances in Murima, and most importantly, he will be able to completely protect himself from the Yu family. All that remained was to persuade his father. Yu Sung burst into tears when he found out that the man was indeed willing to be his son's teacher. Father was too emotional. Jang Sung insisted on this and said that our hero is like his own son to him. The main character was very embarrassed and ashamed to watch this situation. The head was scared when he learned about the worries on the emperor's soul. But the news that the Sword King himself will watch over his son makes him happy. It seems that the emperor is worried about who will inherit the throne. He wants him to leave an heir. But the man does not have the strength for this, because he is already old. Chang Sung says that the emperor entrusted this to Yu Sung because he has deep trust in him. The young gentleman notices how interesting these two are, but he doesn't feel anything positive because everything hurts. Soon, it was time to say goodbye. The father is already sitting in the carriage and instructs his son to obey his uncle and teach himself in training. The father continues to say a lot more in farewell, but the son no longer wants to listen to it and prays that he will leave soon. Finally, the carriage moves away. The main character sighs with relief and smiles, feeling freedom. But he is disappointed when he opens his eyes. He sees his father and Huang get out of the carriage and continue to wave at him until the last one. Suddenly, his uncle called him and told him to follow him. Our hero was a little surprised. Are they really going to start working like that right away? As they walked down the street, all the passers-by bowed to Jang Sung in greeting. It immediately became clear to Yu Hyun that everyone here respected him if he caused them to react like this. Finally, they come to the right place. The guards immediately parted. Now they are climbing a long flight of stairs. Soon they climb right up to the gate wall, but that's not all. Yu Hyun carefully examines everything here because he finally got a chance to experience real life. But unexpectedly, the man suddenly pushes himself off the ground and jumps high. It was a procession of great emptiness. With this technique, the Sword King was able to jump onto the roof. Then he looked at his disciple and told him to go up to him too. Since our hero's opponent is a Sword King, he can't use Kingun Kabana. Because if a man finds out about this, I will definitely ask how he knows this technique, and the guy will not be able to answer. That is why the young man uses another technique, thanks to which he easily jumps off the ground. And in a moment he is... Jang Sung praised the student for his excellent control of his body. The man asks the boy if he noticed any roads on the way. Yes, Yu Hyun noticed. Then, the teacher asks how many cities Yu Hyun thinks he has already visited. The main character thinks that the teacher was testing his observation while he was deliberately confusing. Unfortunately, the guy was not very attentive. When there was no response, Chang Sung replied that he had visited 64 cities. And it all belongs to the Namgun family. Our hero almost cursed when he realized how great this family is. Parubka found it hard to believe that they were so rich. Then, the teacher pointed with his finger to the gazebo which was located on the hill. From there to there were the possessions of their family. This was everything. Absolutely everything belonged to the Namgun family. But Yu Hyun doesn't understand what his teacher is leading him to, and what he wants to say. After a second, he asks what impression this made our hero. But the young man still could not understand what it was about. Yu Hyun thinks the teacher wants him to run back and forth, showing off his qigong. Then, the main character prepares to run, but this only makes the teacher laugh, and he says that the boy did not understand anything. But after a moment, the boy falls and hits his head on the ground. He didn't fall by himself. It was the teacher's fault. The young man asks his uncle to explain everything in simple terms, because he is not very smart. It turns out that Jang Sung was saying all this to the point that one day all these possessions could become Yu Hyun's possessions. As soon as the young man marries the man will take responsibility and give half of the possessions as a dowry. Finally, the main character has a puzzle in his head, why they are here. It turns out that his uncle brought him here just to talk about marrying his daughter. Now everything became obvious. The uncle specifically tried to lure the boy with possessions so that he agreed to the marriage. Jang Sung says not to worry about his daughter because he will definitely talk her out of it. But our hero did not even want to listen to this. And after a second, he was on the ground. But the teacher started chasing his student. He was determined to give his daughter in marriage to Yu Hyun. If this dowry is not enough, the uncle can add more. Suddenly, the whole image of a mad old man from a past life was imposed on the respected genius of martial arts. The man continued to insist that the boy marry his granddaughter, but he was against it. The teacher simply could not understand the reason why the boy refuses the marriage. It doesn't make sense for Yu Hyun to marry just because of Jang Sung's possessions, because his family already has full wealth and connections to the emperor, and he is the only son of such a large family, so a man can forget about this idea once and for all. The main character was a little disappointed because he thought that the teacher would teach him martial arts. But it seems that the man is not going to let go of this thought so easily. He knows that the boy is interested in martial arts and wants to take advantage of it. The next day, as soon as the sun rose, Chang Sung had already started training. He practiced the moves. The boy could not understand what the teacher was doing so early, because he could have slept. What the man had just done was called royal sword art. The older you get, the less you start to sleep in the morning. But this old man is really full of strength. The man also says that this sword is unusual and full of energy. And to demonstrate this, he throws a ball at a winter tree, which is very expensive, and the sword itself cuts it down. Chang Sung wanted to show all his strength to the student and got a little tired. He said that martial knowledge is passed down only to direct descendants, but if the boy marries his granddaughter, he will pass on all his knowledge to him. As soon as our hero heard about the marriage, he immediately left. The uncle did not leave the boy with this offer. These are martial arts that only Namgun's direct descendants possess, and he can only get them by marrying a girl. But in Yu Hyun's opinion, there was nothing special about the Namgun family's martial arts. The man clearly did not expect to hear these words, and it caused him to laugh loudly. Although the young man has talent, he only recently officially entered the fighting world. Uncle says martial art is different from his vision. This martial training has been refined from generation to generation for several centuries, but the student interrupts him and says that it looks very easy to repeat. Yu Hyun is even willing to demonstrate it, so that the man does not think that he is only good at words. Then, the boy picks up a stick from the ground. Our hero hopes that at least with this method, he will be able to distract the old man from himself. Fortunately, Yu Hyun had time to learn the Namgun family's martial arts in his past life, because he practiced it often. All the same, the gossip has already spread, and nothing will change if the guy wakes up as a genius once again. The main character starts swinging his stick chaotically, trying to reproduce the movements of his teacher. And so, after a second, the boy concentrates as much as possible, and his movements become more confident. And after a second, he manages to exactly repeat the movements of his teacher. Yu Hyun moves quickly and skillfully, replicating his teacher's every move while the summoner is in place and watching. Chen Sung just can't fathom how this child was able to repeat the royal sword art. Suddenly he shouts and asks the boy to stop. The man shouts loudly and gets angry, not understanding how the boy was able to master the Namgun family's sword technique. But the young man calmly replies that his uncle himself just demonstrated this technique to him. Jang Sung is still in shock at how special this young man is. He only needed a look to perfectly reproduce his technique, and this means that he is facing a real genius. Yu Hyun calls out to his teacher, but he is so lost in his thoughts that he doesn't answer right away and even forgets to blink. After that, the guy throws away the stick and leaves, once again saying that he is not going to get married. But what the teacher just saw only made him want the boy to marry his granddaughter even more. Meanwhile, 3 strangers in big hats and squares came to town. It seems that they were in this city for the first time and did not know anything. Their leader ordered them to disperse so that the search could proceed more quickly. Ma Huan already had some information. He bribed a man from that settlement to get information. It was from him that he learned that this guest had arrived a few days ago, and immediately began to recruit everyone who was familiar with the mountain trails in order to find the red stone. And this guy's name was Jean Wigan. And now this creepy man in a hat knew exactly who he had to look for. At this time, Jo Song was standing at the door of the house and loudly called his uncle. After a second, the door opened and the protagonist came out of the room. The boy doesn't understand why uncle is still here, because training starts today. But Yu Hyun doesn't want to learn the ins and outs of the Namgun family's teachings. But the guy is not going to give up and asks the young man to follow him. In his past life, only seeing this look scared Yu Hyun. But now he's just a boy. Jo Sung doesn't like Yu Hyun at all, even though he heard from his grandfather about his incredible talent. There is nothing wrong with the fact that he has excellent physical data. A true master of martial arts must equally train both the body and inner strength. But even so, Jo Sung can't feel this weirdo's nagging at all. Nerves fail the boy, and he grabs our hero by the shoulder, saying that he must leave while he is spoken to nicely. But such behavior only makes our hero laugh. This fool is digging his own grave. In this case, it's time to let go of your former teacher and try to make a real student out of him. The boy removes his hand and says that at the moment Jo Sun has nothing to teach him. But if Yu Hyun was a boy, the situation would be completely different. The boy's nerves have already run out. He calls our hero uncle and behaves politely with him. But then where does he have so much arrogance? But our hero only continues to drive the guy out of himself more. He can barely hold back his fists. And after that, Yu Hyun called him his nephew. If he wants, he can try to take him out of here by force. The main character was very good at making people mad. The guy couldn't hold back anymore. But the young man was disappointed when he heard that his nephew outright called him a brat. Our hero thought that the young gentleman would say something much worse. But the young gentleman's speech came from him in such a way that it was disgusting to listen to. But judging by the expression on the face of this young man, it can be concluded that he swallowed the provocation. Hyun decides to add fuel to the fire and tells him to turn to him for you, and he also scolds him for not knowing a single swear word. It turns out that Jo-sung never used swear words. Hyun thought that the boy knew a lot of swear words since he was a child, because in his past life he used to call him names every day. His middle name was Seven Senses Sword King. Every person has 7 emotions: fear, love, pleasure, sadness, disgust, anger, and joy. This man was the one who embodied them all in martial arts. Maybe that's why he killed him every morning, just because he was in a bad mood, and during meals he was beheaded for a good mood. And when it was raining outside, the teacher killed him and was sad. It was very difficult to adapt to this character, which changed several times a week. The main character was beaten almost always. The boy didn't understand how Jo-sun was able to reach the top when he brought all emotions to the absolute, if he was holding them back so much now. If everything remains as it is, then one of the heroes will simply disappear. At first, the main character just wanted to help the boy see, but in his case, it will be necessary to change his character. Very hard, long but interesting work awaits them. After a second, our hero finds himself right in front of the boy and says that after beating him, he will understand everything. Jo-sun immediately recognized that the boy had used the Heavenly Wind move. Now the guy swings in and is going to show him what the difference is between the original and the fake. The boy admits that the student fights quite well, but too bluntly. The main character quickly dodges and jumps. His legs end up at the top and his head at the bottom. And after a second, Jo-sun receives a strong blow, but manages to block it, so he is not badly hurt. It was quite difficult to block this shot, and our hero points out that the guy has very poor defense. Just a second later, Hyun runs towards the boy, his hand clenched into a fist. The guy accumulates all the energy in his hands and thinks that he can make the opponent jump back. Hyun immediately bit into his plan and realized that he wanted to push away his inner energy. But would he succeed? And now, after a moment, the main character hits his fist directly on the guy who put up the block. This fist was very difficult to withstand, and the boy did not even believe that he was capable of such a thing. Our hero used the enemy's second misfire to strike and break through the defense, and at the moment of reaching the limit, it triggered an explosion of energy, increasing the force of the blow. Just like in the Namgun family's fist technique, the main character uses the grotto explosion technique. From such a force, Jo-sung flies into the wall and breaks it, falling to the floor. The boy was badly injured by such a blow. He is coughing, and his nose is bleeding. The boy was told that the young master did not have inner strength, but now he realized that this was all untrue. Was it really enough for him just to look to perfectly repeat everything? Even how to control ki? Does he really have a talent given by heaven? The main character approaches his nephew, who is still lying on the ground, and says that he is still a long way from him. After a second, loud screams are heard and it becomes clear what is happening outside. Hyun begins to mercilessly spank his student, bringing tears of happiness to his eyes. Parabok has been waiting for this day for a long time. He was waiting for the day of revenge. Finally, Jo-sung starts using swear words and yelling. Our hero with a smile continues to beat him and say that this is anger. The protagonist did not feel sorry for his nephew at all, because now he was driven by a sense of revenge and pleasure. It was all because Jo-sung is very weak and can't even defend himself. Hyun realizes that in order to find the second spiritual treasure, he must first find that boy. Hyun took the beaten boy into the room and after a while, when he had regained consciousness, said that they would train together. Thus, very soon the boys began to train together. Again and again they repeated the same movements, perfecting and practicing them. After such training, the boy was very tired, but our hero could finally see his reaction. Jo-sun was not going to give up and gave his all. There was now enough internal power invested in his punches. Thus, in just a few days, the boy mastered the way to fill a sword with anger. These were pretty good results. After all, only if you push a person to the limit, you will be able to achieve rapid development. This is the end of the anger phase. We need to move on to learning how to extract this anger. The main character continues training with the boy and hits him hard with his knee, which causes him to rise a meter above the ground. And so, our hero wants to make the last blow and I'm already preparing my fist for it. But suddenly he notices how the student's eyes are filled with rage and anger. Not only does Jo-sung seem to dodge the punch, he punches back. But Hyun jumps and the boy just hits the ground. Jo-sung hoped that this time he would definitely hit the teacher. But it was not like that at all. He could already feel the evil higher aura of his teacher behind his back, which sent goosebumps down his skin. Yuhyun says that training is over for today, and suggests the student take a little walk outside the gate. Jo Song looked at the teacher in surprise and asked where he was going. At the same time, he tried to restore his even breath, but the main character only looked at the student with his creepy look for interrupting him. Although the young man was smiling, his aura was not friendly. Then, the boy immediately jumped up and started asking where the boy should be taken. Meanwhile, many people walked the streets of the city. Everyone had their own affairs. A poor man sat by the wall. He begged. His clothes were badly torn and he didn't even have shoes on. Suddenly, a passerby threw some coins into his bowl. The poor man is very grateful for the monetary help. But the passerby asked instead of gratitude to talk to him a little. It turns out that they were subordinate servants of chaos. Under the guise of a normal conversation, they passed information to each other. The man said that there is no one in Namgun's family named Jin Vegan. Of course, the man agrees to talk. But when he heard the information that there is no one with such a name, he was very shocked. But there was one person whose appearance very strangely coincided in time. Ma Huang immediately changed his expression when he heard this. That person was Yu Hyun. This is Yu Sung's only son. He is currently staying at the Namgun family estate. The man asks how they should act in this situation and asks if they should ask the head for help. Just at this moment, our hero and his student go outside the estate. The creepy man says they don't need anyone's help. They will check everything themselves. Nothing has been confirmed yet, so don't take your time away from the chapter. In any case, the man has already introduced subordinates to our hero. When they passed the information to each other, their conversation was over. They say goodbye under the guise of ordinary people, and the man prepares to leave. In fact, they are getting ready to perform right now. Ma Huang immediately gets up after their conversation and prepares to go about his business. Two locals have seen this suspicious man for a long time. He has been walking around the Namgun family for several days now. He does not pay taxes but collects a huge alms himself. He must be punished for this, because this tramp is simply taking someone else's place for business. They are going to gather the boys to teach him a lesson. After a few hours, evening comes. The sun has almost hidden behind the horizon. Jo Sun carries 2 bags that are filled with books. He does not understand why the main character needed so many books with sad stories. All this was so that Jo Song would read them and know the true sorrow, because he was born in a good family and did not experience the poverty and pain of his relatives. In his mind, the boy thought that our hero had a golden spoon in his mouth even more than he did. After only a second, Yu Hyun changes the subject and invites the student to go and watch something very funny. For example, Peking opera. This suggestion makes Jo Sun smile as he's glad that they won't be training. The boy says that joy gives peace to the soul and does not allow anger or sadness to fill it. Only if a person possesses peace of mind will he be able to expand his worldview in the end. Then the guy will be able to better see the movements of his opponent. At the same time, the boys are closely watched by Ma Huang. He ordered the other subordinates to sit quietly on the tail of these two and follow them. Ma Huang is going to personally catch Yu Hyun and orders his subordinates to deal with the heir of the Namgun family. The main thing is not to reveal yourself to anyone until they leave Hefei. Suddenly, someone addresses this hat-wearing stranger and calls him a bag of bones. This also attracts the attention of our hero and his student. Many boys came out to meet the poor man, shaking their fists. The stranger did not pay for the past place, as he had already left for a new one. Ma Huang immediately ordered his subordinates to cancel the plan. The man did not understand why everything had gone so wrong just now. This man's name was Wang Thol, and he is the head of the Powa gang from Hefei. Soon, the men surrounded the stranger. But he still did not understand the reason for such behavior, and asked for an explanation. Ma Huan realizes that if he uses the inner energy, he will be noticed by the heir of the Namgun family, and they cannot allow themselves to be exposed. Therefore, a man must make sacrifices and allow himself to be beaten. Jo Sun notices the fight in the alley and asks his uncle if they should break them up. Our hero explains that justice does not always prevail in the world, as in the books. So it is not something that should be interfered with. It is obvious that a gang of poor people and a gang of vagabonds will share the alley with each other for a few more days. It was the Pova gang, although she is a part of Keben. But in reality, there is no relation to him. In other words, it's not a fight between Muramu members, so you shouldn't pay attention to it. And after a few seconds, the boys decide to return home. And as soon as the commander receives the news that there is no one around, he begins to show his true power. Now he can go all out and use his inner strength. Ma Huang pushes one of these people away, and after a few seconds, the group comes to his aid. The man was still furious that these losers had dared to interfere with their plan. The leader of the gang became very scared, but he still ordered his subordinates to join the battle against these people. Ma Huang was very angry with these scumbags for ruining his plan. This was a 1 in a million chance. There must be no mistake in their grand plan. And the only way to hold this idiot accountable for his actions is death. After killing her head, he gives an order to his subordinates. The chief ordered them to deal with these scoundrels without leaving any trace. A second later, screams were heard and blood splattered. But, fortunately, one of the poor managed to escape. He was in tears and in a panic. The man hid in a wheat field. Only then did it become clear that these people are not vagabonds at all. The frightened man runs away and realizes that he must report this to the Keban branch. Meanwhile, Jang Sung received a letter saying that his request to come was rejected. The man was angry. His granddaughter said she could not marry against her will. Grandfather ordered to send a heavenly squad after her. They should bring his granddaughter immediately. But it was impossible to do it, because he had already gone to the place of the battle of the groups. She specially arranged for her letter to arrive after she left. Jang Sung was very angry with his son for not raising his children well, but before, Grandpa himself said that he wanted to raise a girl as a female warrior who represents the Namgun family. Then the man decides to carry out another plan. We need to send our hero to the Jeonmu Alliance. Grandfather quickly runs to the main character to tell him about his idea. Suddenly he hears someone shouting. This leads him to think that someone has invaded their property. A second later, he quickly jumps over the gate to see what the noise is and what's going on. But when he sees what is behind the gate, he is shocked. The man is a little stunned when he sees that it was the training of his grandson and our hero. Jang Sung can't believe that his grandson is just being beaten now, and it's even difficult for him to defend himself. Yu Hyun tells the student to put sadness in the sword, and remember how he felt when the main character of the novel he read died. Because of this, the boy starts to cry, and as soon as the guy mentions it, the force of his blow increases several times. This energy seemed to be filled with pent-up anger. Yu Hyun notices the old man on the wall and doesn't understand what he forgot there. Suddenly, the protagonist orders his student to stop fighting. Of course, the boy obeys him and suddenly freezes. And after a second, the boy starts cursing and screaming, because he was just starting to come out, and the teacher cut him off like that. Jang Sung is shocked to hear his grandson using foul language. After a second, our hero turns to the grandfather who is sitting on the wall and asks what he is doing there. The man starts looking for an excuse and says that their training just seemed interesting to him, so he wanted to watch it. The old man thought that our hero had drawn his grandson to the sword, but he denied it and said that they were just sparring. Joe didn't understand why his teacher lied, because he was really teaching him. But then why lie? Jang Sung understands very well that his grandson's style was different from the basics of their family. Yu Hyun lies and says that this method was suggested by Jo Sung himself. Jo Sung is frightened and looks at her teacher and does not understand why he rushed at him. Our hero explained that it was the Seven Senses sword technique. The guy started lying that Jo Sung said he had a breakthrough, something like a way to put feelings into a sword. Grandfather seriously thought about this technique. This meant that Namgun's sword, which rejected joy and change, began to change as it met the new century. But the main character still did not understand what brought the old man here. The man is about to tell the purpose of his visit, but suddenly one of his subordinates runs into the yard. He says that a man from the Keban branch of Hefi has just arrived, and the reason for their visit was that a real tragedy happened near the branch at night. They had to go and solve this case. Training was stopped. Our hero, meanwhile, doesn't understand how grandfather and grandson can be so similar, even when just looking at each other. Since the guy has nothing to do now, he decides to take a little walk around the city. Of course, he is being watched all this time. The subordinate asks the commander how they should proceed in this situation. It is not known when such a chance will arise for them again. Therefore, it was necessary to act sharply and not to hesitate. The commander ordered to keep an eye on him. All subordinates immediately rushed to carry out the order. The commander said that as soon as the boy reached a deserted place, he should be grabbed and dragged out of Hefei. The city streets were very busy today. People were walking everywhere. The main character felt all the pleasure of such a peaceful walk. In Anping, he could not afford this because everyone around him recognized him and brought gifts. But even in spite of this, the young man still missed his native place. He hoped that the locals were doing well. Before returning home, the boy has unfinished business. He must gain strength so that everyone can live as well as they do now. Suddenly, our hero's gaze caught on one of the passers-by who looked very familiar. But Yu Hyun chooses to ignore it and thinks that they might just have met somewhere along the way. The boy wants to go to the bookstore. Suddenly, the young gentleman feels something very strange and realizes that he is being watched. There are just as many people on the street. When the main character goes about his business, he feels that someone is following him, and soon he notices that tramp who was beaten to death yesterday. This fool must have thought that the boy wouldn't recognize him in nice clothes. Then, the young man remembers the words of the warrior about the misfortune that happened near the branch. The main character immediately understands that these scoundrels are involved in this. Out of the blue, Yuan turns to one of those who have been following him. Everyone is immediately wary of this, and after a second, the boy pushes this man. As soon as he did this, he ran away and these bastards rushed after him. There were a lot of them, and they were crawling like ants from everywhere. The men turned around the corner, but did not see anyone there. There was a dead end. They did not understand at all where this boy was going, because he definitely ran in this direction. Meanwhile, Yuan was already sitting on the roof of one of the houses asking them why he was being chased by a whole crowd of men. He joked and said that he probably liked them. A second later, the boy comes downstairs and asks why they were following him like rats then. The main character immediately understood that he was their target yesterday, but they were simply prevented. The men don't answer, but judging by their faces, the guy is right. He guesses that these may be the people who were looking for ginseng but were too late. Men think about how to act. Of course you could kill him, but he is the son of the previous heir, and if they do, they will have to deal with the authorities. But first, it was necessary to make sure whether he really stole the ginseng, and they ask him directly. But the main character pretends that he does not know anything, and does not even understand what they are talking about. Is this boy really not involved in this? On the other hand, in order to get chased ginseng, you need to reach the minimum level of key release and above. But nothing is felt from the boy. Yuan perfectly understands that these fools will not be able to sense his spiritual energy. The boy came to the conclusion that these people were definitely somehow related to the Servant of Chaos. Then there is no point in the guy hanging around. He wants to catch them and find out information. Realizing that they made a mistake, the men apologize and are about to leave. But now our hero is not going to let them go just like that. Yuan now wants to know who they are and what they are looking for. A second later, Ma Huang ordered his subordinates to knock this guy down and they immediately rushed towards him. It was quite interesting that in order to overthrow his head, he did not let the killers go. Obviously, our hero is not going to allow himself to be offended and deftly repels the attacks of these bastards. He hit one of the enemies so hard that he flew away and hit the wall. The main character even got a little offended by the fact that they think he is so weak. The man, meanwhile, could not understand how a boy without any inner strength could do such a thing. In this case, our hero said that he will take these two whom he defeated. Now, he is waiting for the next actions of the enemy. Such behavior annoys the man very much, and it seems that he is about to lose control. It will be a little inconvenient if the enemies attack all at once. But on the other hand, he just might be able to change the situation. Then, the young man smiles sarcastically and asks the men if they want to have a little fun with him. After that, the young man throws the man, who was unconscious after his blow, on his shoulder and runs away. Of course, the enemies immediately rushed after him. And behold, the enemy had almost reached him and was too close to swing his weapon and strike. This scoundrel grabbed our hero by his robe. The boy quickly oriented himself and found the place where he needs to lead the enemies. A second later, he grabbed the man on his back and threw him directly onto the roof. The throw was so strong that this man broke the roof. Frightened people quickly ran out of the building because they thought it was starting to break. And a second later, the main character also quickly jumped to climb the building. And when he landed, he hit the roof hard, after which the whole house flew into small pieces. By that time, his enemies had already managed to come here. They were faster than the young man thought. A bright blue glow appeared in the sky above our hero, and it was only at that moment that Ma Huan realized who was standing in front of him. Yuan once again called his enemy a naive fool. Yuan threatens his enemies that very soon they will also face the Namgoon family and Kiban, as our hero just said. If these bastards contact the Namgoon family and Kiban, it will be very difficult to escape. Therefore, it is necessary to act as soon as possible in order to leave this city. Soon, the bastards drew their swords and rushed at the boy, preparing for a fierce battle. It was necessary to act quickly. It's obvious that these bastards planned to kill Yuan in order to shut him up. Of course, the boy was not going to give up. He stepped hard on the ground, and all the stones flew up. Enemies were advancing, and confidently said that now our hero will definitely not be able to hide. But the young man was not going to run away. Instead, he quickly grabbed the debris that was flying upwards. And a second later, he threw them towards the enemies and used the Tang family's 12-chain crossing technique. His enemies were quite good at teamwork, and while one distracted him, another approached him from behind, while the boy exposed his back. But the boy reacts very quickly and grabs his attacker by the neck, lifting him up. He sees that he has a pill in his mouth. Most likely it was poison. A man kills himself so that the enemy cannot give out any information through him. Of course, this surprises our hero a little, but in general he decides not to dwell on it. But the enemies were not finished yet. Ma Huang remained. Yu Hyun was shocked by the brutality of their leader, as he personally killed subordinates in order to get rid of the traces. And after a second, he ordered those who remained alive to retreat. Immediately after his command, the men rushed away while our hero was still shocked by the situation. In this case, the main character is also not going to hold back and wants to show them all his strength. The guy, like lightning, rushes after his enemies. It seemed as if he was faster than the wind. Eventually, Yu Hyun managed to catch up with his enemies, but one of them took a sword and tried to stop the boy. Of course, it didn't help at all because the lad can't stop a normal sword. The boy quickly passed this man because he was not interested in him at all. He was only interested in their head. But, at one point, the men who were being chased by our hero ran in different directions. Yu Hyun knew very well that he couldn't lose this bastard because it would only cause him more problems. But fortunately, the guards, who were already a little warned about everything, came to help the young gentleman. Yu Hyun was very happy to be helped. In this case, he can only focus on one enemy. Ma Huang, although he looked like an old grandfather, was quite physically fit and ran fast. But even so, the main character did not lag behind him at all and pursued him to the very end. The man understood that if he was caught, their grand plan would be in jeopardy. Therefore, a man simply cannot afford to give up. He takes out a small black ball from his pocket. After that, he turns around sharply and throws the ball back, but the boy was already gone. A second later, there is a strong explosion, the cause of which was this ball. It was an explosive, and in a moment this scoundrel will receive a fist in the face. Yu Hyun found himself flanking his enemy before the enemy noticed. Ma Huang slammed into the wall with all his might, which scattered into small stones. Yu Hyun offers to simply accept his fate, because it seems that his subordinates have already been captured as well. The man is barely breathing. He asks if the boy was hiding his power from the Yu family, but the main character is not going to answer his questions because the winner asks the question first. The boy was interested in the question of which gang this man was from, but he ignored him. Realizing that the man does not want to make contact, the guy just smiles. There are only two of them left and they can take their time in getting to know each other. All subordinates, when they understand that the situation is hopeless, put a hand on themselves, and the man will not be an exception to this rule. The man may be destined to die, but he is going to take this young man with him. Yu Hyun is very familiar with this look. The carelessness of our hero annoys the old man. He behaved as if everything that was happening around him was a stupid joke. Since the subordinates of our hero have not yet found them, if the man so wants, the boy will finish him with a single blow. For such insolent and self-righteous words, the man plans to cut this bastard's throat. After that, finally, you bastard, shut your mouth. The man had a hidden trump card. He was hiding another weapon in his hand. When Yu Hyun gets close to him, Ma Huan will have his only chance to strike the boy. The man waits for the young master to attack him in order to put a knife to his throat. Meanwhile, Yu Hyun breathes calmly and concentrates. There is one martial art that will show someone like him what another level means. A carefree force touches the surface of the earth, causing it to tremble slightly. In the foot that has taken a step, one feels the firmness that can support the heavens. A moment later, the main character recharges his energy and prepares to strike. Yu Hyun thrusts his fist forward. The man thinks that the young man wants to intimidate him, but after a second, he is permeated with inner energy. The main character shot from his fist, as if from a gun. Ma Huang definitely didn't expect this turn of events. He had a completely different plan. This energy seems to press him against the wall, and after a second the young man comes closer to finish him off personally. Yu Hyun tells him that it is a forgotten Shaolin technique, the 100-step fist art. Our hero needed to get hit in the face many times in order to master this technique. Now Yu Hyun is wondering what to do with this bastard. He cannot be tortured here, so he decides to take him to Namgun's family. Suddenly, he is interrupted by some men. It was Pek Song, head of the Kaban branch in Hefei. He wants to look at the beaten man, if the boy doesn't mind. It was a rather strange desire, but the main character has nothing against it. A second later, the men approach the barely alive bastard and look at him. The description of this old man is very similar to the thief previously described by the injured Bohm. Pek Sung asks the young master to give this thief to Keban. Yu Hyun was a little taken aback by the audacity of these people. So he caught this thief, and now they just want to take him for themselves. Soon, a student of our hero runs to the scene. He notices that his teacher's clothes are all torn and dirty. Jo Sun was very angry at those people who dared to do this to his teacher. In just 10 days, the boy became a loyal dog of our hero. When the boy runs closer to the main character, He hits him on the back of the head. Jo-sun does not understand the reason why he was hit at all. But Yu-hyun doesn't even explain anything and just swings again, after which the student immediately apologizes. Baek-sung looked at the man who seemed to be already dead. It's not like he was weak at all. Was such a young boy able to defeat such a strong master by himself? He stared at Yu-hyun. After a second, the bearded man apologizes for behaving very rudely. If these men recognized Ma Huan, then Kaban was also looking for him, but why? It turns out that the Pova gang that was related to them was completely wiped out, and it was the handiwork of this thief. Baek-sung asks the young man why he attacked the thief. The protagonist understands that the man is trying to extract information. Yu-hyun replies that those bastards were most likely stalking someone and mistook him for Yu-hyun. Our hero would not allow anyone to control him. Baek-sung looks closely at our hero and senses that he is hiding something. He continues to scrutinize it with his gaze. But still, the only plus was that this thief appeared. Even now, he still does not have enough strength to somehow resist the enemies. In addition, these bastards operate from the shadows, and it is not known what they will do when they find out that the boy is chasing them. And if they learn that their squad was destroyed, they can start acting even tougher. In such a case, even the Yu family may suffer. Therefore, Yu-hyun needs to divert their attention. Moreover, now that he knew that the servant was not alone, it would be easier for him to come up with something. These guys from Kaban will be very suitable for this. If these madmen are determined and find out the secret, then they will definitely face the servant and his army. The guy's job is to give them a little boost. Our hero says that someone is behind these thieves. This makes Baek-sung even more eager to get this thief to get all the information he needs. But Yu-hyun can't do it just like that, because he too almost died in the fight and shows a tiny gash on his hand. After a second, he turns to his student and wants him to help him. But the boy does not understand the hints. In Jo-sun's eyes, it looks like his teacher is angry about something again, and he doesn't understand what he wants from him. Then, the young boy concentrates as much as possible and remembers everything he once knew in order to understand his teacher. A second later, Jo-sung interrupts their conversation and asks the men not to put his uncle in such a difficult position. But it was not at all what our hero wanted from him. Baek-sung continues to insist that they give the crime to them. Jo-sung wanted to repeat his words about the teacher being against it, but the main character stopped him with a punch in the face and said that if the head asks so much, then they don't mind doing it. But he has his conditions. The branch cannot spread the word that the young gentleman is involved in this, and as soon as they learn the identities of these people, they must report it to him. The bearded man promises to fulfill his request. The young gentleman turns around, and as soon as no one sees his face, smiles widely. Everything is going according to his plan. The man from the branch is a little upset that the young gentleman didn't even pay for their investigation. But the bearded man is angry with his comrade, because our hero told them about the coup and it was very important. This phrase of his meant that there are people who want to capture Murim. Now the main thing is that the men managed to beat the information out of this scoundrel. This is a direct road to the old tire place in the main residence. Soon, they pick up this criminal and are going to carry him to the right place. After a few hours, night came. The full moon decorated the sky. In his past life, the servant was supposed to get information about another treasure from Hwang Doksum, who was in the prison of the Jungmu Union. But our hero changed the story because he got hold of the ginseng. And the most important thing is that if the enemy has power, he should be more careful than now. The main character also needs to be even more careful and even faster in order to stop the chaos. That is why Yu-hyun decided to urgently go to the Jeonmu Alliance. It was only in Jang Sung's hands, because he himself wanted to send the boy there. That is why at first the grandfather did not even believe in it. His granddaughter was there, and it was a great reason for them to get closer. Our hero said he wanted Joe to go with him too. Hearing about this, the young man's hair stood on end. But there could be some problems with this because the boy has the responsibilities of an heir. On the shoulders of the heir lies a great responsibility to inherit the family in the future, and he has no freedom of action. Then the main character goes to collect things, but they do not believe that the boy would give up so easily. As Yu-hyun was walking away, he started talking about how there are other 5 hills in Marima besides Haeye. The main character specifically says this in order to annoy the grandfather. The guy says that he really wants to see these girls. Rumor has it that they are very good. After hearing this, Jang Sung was horrified because he knew that this could interfere with his plan to marry a boy to his granddaughter. The main character began to dream about how he would start a family with some girl. She would give birth to a child for him and they would live happily. Chung Sung panicked and ordered the family council to be convened immediately. Yu-hyun walked away happily, knowing that now his student would definitely go with him. Yangtze, Port. The sun was rising over the horizon, and there were already people in the port. A man in a black robe says to look more closely at something. The man takes out an envelope from under his robe, which he then gives to this man from the bottom of his heart. It seems it was a bribe. The man turned to the workers and told them to spread the boxes quickly, and then go have breakfast. When the work is done, the men get off the ship while the other says goodbye to them. In fact, the man really disliked officials, because all they did was show off their money. Soon, the ship moved away from the shore. The man went down into the hold, but he did so carefully so that no one could see. The man coughs, signaling that the man can go out and not worry, because he ordered his sailors not to go down into the hold. A mustachioed man emerges from behind the large boxes and says that he will pay the rest as soon as they arrive at their destination. After that, the man climbs back on deck. All they had to do was survive the encounter with the black whale pirates. Fortunately, they at least have no problem paying for the pass. Meanwhile, more people come on deck. This was our hero and his student. The boys begin to discuss pirates and why anyone is so afraid of them. Jo Song understood that catching pirates was a very good thing, but they could suffer great losses. However, our hero sees nothing of the sort in this. Yu Hyun's face showed that he knew absolutely nothing about these places. If these pirates are caught, the problems can be much more serious than it seems at first glance. Does our hero want to say that he is going to deal with a whole crowd of pirates himself? Moreover, they have a monster with which the grandfather has been fighting for many years. The main character does not understand what he is talking about. It turns out that we are talking about a water tamer king named Tu Tajin. This man is called the Monster of the Seas. The student very much asks his uncle to sit still and not think anything up, because after that, a war may begin. But Yu Hyun doesn't react in any way, but still listens to the boy in silence. A second later, he smacks him on the back of the head without saying anything. Jo Sung doesn't understand why his teacher keeps fighting. Meanwhile, our hero thinks about the boy's words. But you won't do anything. The main character really understands that this time it is better not to interfere. Many seagulls circle above the ship. Suddenly, someone from the ship's crew notices the ship of the black whale pirates. Everyone on board immediately fell silent and concentrated. You have to be very careful. Soon, the pirate ship floated closer to the civilian ship. The pirates lowered a small bridge between their ships and stepped on it. Soon the pirates board their ship. The captain of the pirates greets the man who is in charge of this ship. A second later, the boss orders one of his subordinates to bring the pass fee. A chest of gold is brought to him. Kudok was very pleased that this man didn't even need to say anything. He understood everything himself. Jo Sun is watching this and understands that the deal was successful. The boy didn't understand why these damn pirates wouldn't go away if they had already received their money. It turns out that the captain had another order. He had to find one person. Kudok asked if everyone had gone up on deck. Was there anyone the chief was hiding? But the captain of the pirates knew very well that sometimes the head can lead the violators. If this is not the person they are looking for, then the pirate will simply turn a blind eye to it. The head values his life, so he decides to say. After a second, he admits that there is one dynamite in the ship's hold. Kudok tells the passengers that they are looking for a person who committed a crime and escaped, so if people help them, nothing will happen. The pirate captain ordered everyone to line up. Meanwhile, our hero looked at the beautiful sea and its scenery. He was noticed by one of the pirates. The man came up and hit him on the head. He did this because our hero did not line up as the captain requested. Jo Song was very afraid that his uncle might lose his temper and take revenge for himself. His gaze was filled with rage. Suddenly, some screams are heard from the hold, which attract attention. A second later, a mustachioed man steps out onto the deck. Kudok regrets that he didn't agree to come out, and instead dared to hit his men. Kiban had certainly tried his best to find the man, but were they planning to punish him with some miserable pirates? Hearing this, the captain became angry. He was going to behead him alive. The main character observed the situation and recognized that the pirate is quite good at martial arts, but he didn't manage to catch this mustachioed man, because he jumped up high and dodged. People only raised their heads in shock and looked at the stranger. Suddenly the main character jumped up and took out his sword, saying that he will kill these bastards. It is not clear why, but the uncle rushed into battle. The community carefully watched their match. The pirate tore the clothes of his opponent. Suddenly, the main character notices a red snake tattoo on the man's arm. He mentions that there was a man with a red snake tattoo in the Jeonmu Union prison. He knows where the second treasure is, which our hero needs so much. Yu Hyun was shocked at how lucky he was. Heaven follows him. Jo Sung shouts after the boy and asks him not to interfere because he promised, but Yu Hyun isn't going to listen to that. He tells the student to protect the people if even one person is hurt. he will face 2 days of tough anger training. Then, the boy takes out his sword and prepares to defend the common people. But there are too many enemies, and the only way to deal with them is to increase the speed of the sword. Sorrow makes the sword very light, so the boy does everything to cry. The young man quickly fends off absolutely all pirate attacks that were aimed at civilians. Ordinary people are very grateful to him for their salvation. Jo-sung doesn't quite understand what his teacher is planning to do. Meanwhile, the duel between the captain and this mysterious man continues. Hwang Doksum is perfectly aware that his opponent is putting too much effort against him. This is what he decides to use in order to win. Suddenly, something lightning fast and incomprehensible flashed between the men. The main character appeared in front of the mustachioed man and came to his defense. The palms of our hero turned into fists and he hit the captain hard. The frightened mustachioed man could not understand why this stranger stood up for him. Yu Hyun immediately cut to the chase and asked the man if it was true that he was Hwang Dosum. It was possible not to answer because everything became clear from his facial expression. Our hero was going to save the man, but he had a question. The main character turns to the pirates and says that he needs this mustachioed man. He gives them a choice. Either they just walk away, or he kills them all. But the pirates only silently looked at our hero, as if he were a fool. When Yu Hyun looked around to see what the matter was, he didn't see Hwang Doksum nearby, even though he was standing there a minute ago. The young man quickly runs to the side of the ship to see where he has gone. It turns out that this brave man just jumped into the open sea. The main character does not understand at all why the man is running away from him, if he saved him. Meanwhile, the captain had already come to his senses and ordered his pirates to catch this bastard. After a second, the pirates started jumping off the ship to catch up with him. Our hero just sighed heavily, because he understood that it is so easy to not cope with it. Suddenly, the boy turned to his student and ordered him to get rid of the pirate captain. And if the boy does not cope with this, then the teacher will punish him with hard training. Jo-sun was too motivated to win because he didn't want to practice. A second later, the main character also jumped into the sea to catch up with that man. In the water, the boy turns into a shark. It was his element. Jo-sun approaches the pirate captain and tries to get him information about who he is and why they are chasing that man. But after a second, the young man remembers that he was ordered to kill this scumbag and takes out his sword. The boy treated Kudok no more than a pathetic pirate who had just nearly sent people to their deaths. Jo-sung is not going to waste too much time on him and grabs his hair. Meanwhile, Yu Hyun had already caught up with the pirates who were chasing Hwang Doksum. Then the pirate took out his sword and tried to get rid of the stubborn boy who was still following him. But when he swung his sword, he was shocked when he saw no one behind him. Where did this stranger go? The man was hiding in anticipation. Suddenly Yu Hyun jumped at him from above and kicked him right in the face. The blow was so strong that the pirate went straight to the bottom of the sea. But it was not the end. It was still full of pirates still chasing after Hwang Doksum. The main character literally walked over their heads without any shame. Yu Hyun pushed off their heads as if they were ordinary stones, and he was crossing a big river. The main character was amused by the thought that he would be able to cross the Yangtze on the pirates' heads. Finally, the main character got to Mr. Doksum so quickly that he was able to address him. The main character was already very close, and the pirates, in the meantime, were out of order. This boy was a great master of flying over water, thought Mr. Doksum. But in fact, the guy was ideally equipped with martial arts. But even if everything turned out like this, the mustachioed man will not allow himself to be captured so easily. Our hero is very annoyed by this, because he does not understand why to waste energy like that. The man throws a punch which the young man easily dodges. After that, Yu Hyun grabs the man's clothes, which he clearly didn't expect. And a second later he throws it right on the shore. The protagonist once again tells the man that he will save him if he answers the questions correctly. But Hwang Doksum yells nervously and says that he's not going to trust such rascals like this guy. The main character was shocked by this man's manners. He hasn't named himself yet, but he's already calling himself names. Mr. Hwang was shaking with fear, but the young man told him not to even try to run away. He will deal with those who will interfere with their conversation. After a second, the boy presses on a point on the man's body, which is in the area of the collarbones. After this action, the man seems to lose his tongue. The main character asks to understand him correctly. He just doesn't want Mr. Hwang to run away again. Soon, the same pirates who have been chasing the man all this time swim to the shore. Yu Hyun quickly starts thinking about what he should do if there are so many enemies. But the idea of using the Tang family's hidden weapon immediately comes to mind. This is just right for this situation. After a second, the miserable pirates rushed at the young man in a crowd, drawing their swords. But it seems the young man was not in a hurry at all. At first, Yu Hyun had a rather calm personality. But as his cruel teacher An Jong-soo said, The whole essence can become a hidden weapon. When you increase your level, you can use not only stones but also sand as a weapon. That will be enough for now. For example, in the Fortress of 9 Dragons, our hero used ordinary snow as a weapon. And now the boy has collected a lot of stones, which he will also use as a weapon. After a moment, he throws it right at the enemies. Stones fly at high speed and hit the target precisely. The cries of pirates are heard. After a second, they are all lying motionless on the ground with a lot of wounds and bruises. The pirates who were still standing gasped in horror. They were literally shaking. Yuan understands that if things continue like this, war will definitely break out, and he doesn't want people to get hurt. In this case, the only thing left is to remove all the witnesses. As soon as the miserable pirates saw that the boy had taken out his sword and heard what he had just said, they instantly rushed away. But it was useless to run, because Yuan will still catch up with absolutely everyone and will spare no one. A few minutes later, the pirates were finished, and the young man turned to Mr. Huang again. Yuan approached the frightened Mr. Huang and lightly touched his face with his fingers, instilling even more terror. Huang Doksam still can't understand what kind of weirdo is in front of him. Our hero is called Gene Vegan. The boy cannot reveal his true identity to him in case the man is somehow related to the servant. Now the young man must figure out how to extract information about the treasure from him. The main character had only one question, so he asked to be taken seriously. Jean Vigan directly asks the man where the 1,000-year-old shell is. Mr. Huang is shocked and does not understand where the young man got this information. By such a man's reaction, you can understand that he really knows her location. Huang Doksam tries to lie and says he doesn't know what it is or where it is, but he's not good at lying. In this case, our hero is going to check something and gets up. Gene Wigan begins kicking the man mercilessly, trying to get this important information out of him. The main character continues to beat the unfortunate, saying that he can do this for a very long time. At the same time, a boat with Joe Song is coming to the shore. But the boy does not understand why the teacher went so far. Now he was hitting this man even harder than he usually did. It turns out that Ju Sung made Gudok the one to row. The man was badly beaten, and all this was the work of the young man. Jo Sun orders the pirate to row more slowly, although at first he pushed the opposite way. The captain is going to suffer a little longer, then reassures himself that these two will go to hell when the chapters come out. Still, Mr. Huang came back to his senses, and the first thing he did was shout loudly. Huang Doksum was on the boat of our hero and his student. It turns out that he was disconnected for 4 hours. Therefore, the main character is going to start prevention again, and raises his leg in order to beat him again. Suddenly, the pirates shout that they have arrived at the place. The boys don't understand what he means. A large ship with black sails was visible on the sea horizon. Kudok laughed loudly. The bearded man was really pleased with himself because he did everything the way he planned. It turns out that the scoundrel deliberately brought them to the main ship of the Black Whale pirates. Kudok was proud of himself because he was sure that these bastards would definitely not be able to cope with the pirates and would go to the bottom of the sea. But a second later, the bastard gets slapped in the face by Yu Hyun. Jo Song asked his teacher to be more careful, but he didn't listen to him at all, and that's why they got into trouble. But our hero was not upset at all. Yu suggests to Hyun to split up, finish quickly, and go back to the ship. And after a second, they go on the boat, straight to the pirates. Yu Hyun is only happy to welcome the guests. Several hours passed and evening came. By this time, the pirate ship had already been completely destroyed, instead of corpses lying in the wreckage. One of the pirates was still alive, but badly beaten. He barely held on to the wooden board. The exhausted and weary man looked at the small boat that was drifting away from the wreckage. On the boat were Kudiok, Deok Sung, and Yu Hyun. The boys had already finished their business here, so it was necessary to move on. The enraged pirate called Kudok a rabid worm and couldn't understand why he was on their oars. Suddenly, another pirate who remained alive swam to the head from another part of the wreckage. The chief asked if they had a red flare left. It was wet, but does it work? But if they use a flare, the master will find out that they voluntarily accepted the task. There was no time to think about it. The rocket had to be launched. They could endure a few insults from the master. But now it is much more important to protect the pride of the black whales. The pirate pointed the flare into the sky, preparing to launch it. As soon as she fires, their head will arrive here. The water tamer king, who conquered all the pirates, must arrive here. This man keeps even the warriors of the martial world in awe. At this time, a man in a green suit is sitting in his suit and doing his business. The man saw this red projectile flying over the Yangtze River. Chegul Subom is a great advisor to the Jonmu Alliance. The man could not believe that this had happened. 2 hours ago, a red shell was fired in the Yangtze River area. We must open the checkpoints to the Yangtze River. A red projectile is a pirate signal that is launched only in moments of great threat. Therefore, the man could not even think how terrible the reason could be. But unfortunately, they have not yet found out the reason for launching this projectile. Shigal Subom was incredibly angry because 2 whole hours had already passed, and these fools had still not been able to establish the reason for the launch of the red projectile. If this enemy is so important that the pirates even launched a red projectile, then they should get it. The enemy of the enemy is an ally. He says to give the order to the head of the Green Dragons. Let him urgently go to the western checkpoint and suppress the protests. It is impossible for the pirates to get the Wuhan waterway, which includes the Chongmu Alliance. The men know that the projectile was launched from the waterways from Anhui to Hubei. Hearing about this, Chigal Subom immediately understood that the signal came from black whales. According to the intelligence report, the Water Tamer King is located in the Ezhou area. This meant that the Tamer King had definitely seen the red projectile. The man nervously asks which of Kiben, who is visiting the Union, has the highest status. The younger Wandering Dragon has arrived to take the entrance exam for the Hiding Dragon Troop. It meant that the man was already here. The news that a gun had been fired on the Yangtze River had already reached one tavern. Kadushin is Kiban's younger Wandering Dragon. The boy is very unhappy with this news because even delusions must have a limit. The boy is trying to wake up one of his friends, who has already drunk a lot and fallen asleep. The boy screams loudly in an attempt to wake up his friend. The boy was indignant that they dared to wake him up. He didn't understand why they were doing this if all he wanted right now was to sleep. He woke him up because the boy is going to Shanxi tomorrow, where a war has broken out with other factions, which means they won't be able to see each other for a long time. But it seems the guy does not see anything tragic in this at all. Kadushin wants to say goodbye to his friend, because they won't see each other for a long time, but he doesn't feel like it now, because alcohol is pouring outside again. The boy snorted in displeasure, and said that you can't expect a single drop of affection from this fool. After a second, he handed his comrade a knot, and asked him to go to the crossing and find a group of vagabonds there. Let them take a thorough look at the Wuhan waterway in the north. After that, the boy ran away from the room. The guy who had just been sleeping on the table and was very drunk got up and sighed with relief. He understands that the Water Tamer King himself will most likely intervene in this matter, and I would really hate for this warm-hearted vagabond to get hurt just like that. Meanwhile, some unknown people are sailing on a small boat that swayed on weak waves. A strange man stood on the edge and looked over the horizon. He had a strange hat and unusual white hair. It was already deep night. The wreckage of the pirate ship was still bobbing on the waves. The people on the civilian ship were very frightened by what had happened. They still haven't left the place. Zhou Sun continues to fend off enemies. Zhou Song quickly looked up and saw his uncle there. The main character at this time was also fighting one of the enemies. Yu Hyun was determined to win. The opponent simply lost consciousness from his blows. It seems that our heroes had serious problems. As soon as they turned back with Huang Doksum in hand, the pirates decided to attack them. They kept coming and coming. The main character simply could not allow his hands to be tied. He turned to Kudok. Yu Hyun asked the pirate where the nearest harbor was. Let him take them there, and they will disembark. Suddenly, some stranger tried to jump onto their ship from above. He didn't look like everyone else. After a second, he jumped aboard their ship in a flash. After that, the stranger turned to all the pirates and asked them to listen to him carefully. It turns out that it was Kei Duxin, Kabanu's younger dragon. He said that this vessel is now under protection, so they better back off. The boy turned to our hero and said that now they can rest easy because the Zhongmu Alliance will protect them. It seems that the main character remembered this bastard, but the boy did not understand why our vegetable garden behaved so strangely. The boy shouted loudly and ordered the ship to stop. They obeyed. Turns out this guy was Yu Hyunwoo's teacher in a past life. The pirates immediately began to welcome the chapter. All the ships at one point simply stopped. Then it became clear to our hero what was happening here. Some people were swimming in a small boat between these ships. The boys immediately understood that the King Water Tamer had come here in person. But our hero was not very happy about this, because the enemy was too close to him. His enemy was the leader of a group of bandits, so they could not cross paths. He orders Kaudok to return. The bearded man and several other pirates quickly ran to turn the ship. They grabbed hold of the dams. The men laid down on the dam with all their strength, and the ship slowly began to turn around. But the boat was already very close. The main character perfectly understands that at such a pace a collision is definitely unavoidable. Suddenly, this stranger uses one of his techniques that completely stops the ship and prevents them from colliding. Yu Hyun does not understand what kind of power one must have to be able to stop such a large ship with such ease with just one energy. A second later, the Water Tamer King and some other hulks boarded their ship. The atmosphere changed immediately. Kaduxin kindly greeted the ruler of the Yangtze River. A second later, Josung also joined in the greeting and introduced himself as the son of the Namgun family. But it seems that the mysterious man is completely indifferent to their congratulations. After a second, the main character feels a strong danger, so he concentrates and dodges. At the same time, the big man already takes Kaedushin by the throat and pulls the boy off the ground. The Water Tamer King turns his attention to this mysterious young man. He is surprised that a guy in his early 20s instantly sensed Jun-san's movement and dodged. And he has perfect ki. A second later, Jun-san continues to squeeze the young man's neck in the same way. And finally, a loud crunch is heard. The main character understands that things are bad and turns directly to the elder. Yu-hyun says that the elder is a very famous person. So why would he bully some young lad? This can seriously damage his reputation. The king agrees with this oddball. Indeed, his reputation cannot be allowed to tarnish. He beckons Jun-san to him with his fingers. The man, seeing this, immediately threw the boy out as if he were some kind of waste. Then he turns to our hero and asks him to explain everything that happened here and is happening right now. Yu-hyun understands that he needs to wait a little longer. Very soon they will come to Jongmu Union. Fortunately, Kaedushin was alive. The boy was clutching his throat and trembling with fear. The main character understands that if he says even one wrong word, he may lose his head, because a real monster is standing in front of him. Yu-hyun tells them that they were going by ship to Wuhan. But then pirates appeared and started terrorizing the civilians, and our hero simply decided to show kindness and save people. Obviously, the king did not believe this lie. Anger seems to have gradually taken over him. The boy understood that he urgently needed to come up with some other plan. His brain began to work even harder. The old man said that he is from the Yu family, which is located in Anping. The man may not even know about his family, because it is absolutely not related to Murim. But even despite this, his family has strong support from the authorities. His father used to be a prince, and even now he is taking care of Ying Tianfu's heir at the emperor's request. His teacher, the divine strategist, taught that if he wants to crush the enemy with a word, you must show that you have powerful support. But if there is none, then you must lie boldly. This is exactly what our hero was doing. But the king does not understand at all what this was about, because he does not care at all whether he is a son. Yu-hyun understands that this plan has also failed and something else must be urgently thought of. The man is a pirate. He has been this way since birth and will remain so until the end of his days. So he does not care about anyone's background and who is behind them. The situation is very complicated, because the main character must protect ordinary passengers at any cost. The boy does not understand at all why these two monsters stand in his way, because now he is too weak and will not be able to resist them. The divine strategist also taught that one must be able to suppress the enemy's fears. There is also the option of luring them with something good to arouse interest. Just then, our hero has another idea in his head, and he asks the elder to listen to him. Yu-hyun said that he was just telling him about his status as an acquaintance, and he didn't mean to be rude to him. The man does not understand what the boy is leading to. Our hero would very much like the Tamer King to have mercy and spare him. But he understands that because the boy has destroyed dozens of his ships, this will not be possible. Tutajin listens carefully to his opponent, trying not to miss any detail. The protagonist offers to pay the pirate compensation for all damages. Yu-hyun hopes that at least this plan will work. But the pirate's face did not change at all. Is the guy offering him money? The main character does offer him money. He is willing to pay and waits for Tutajin's price. But the king does not answer and ignores this question. Instead, he starts laughing out loud. Yu-hyun doesn't understand what happened to him. Maybe he went crazy with the thought of riches. After a moment, the king comes very close to our hero, smiles predatorily and says that he likes him and is interested. Yu-hyun quickly backed away because he was scared of being so suddenly close to the man. Tutajin told him to look around carefully. There were already many people on the rocks. These people with swords are already ready to fight, and they are all from the Jongmu Alliance. But does our hero know why these people do nothing? They just try on. At first glance, they are correct. They shout about their union, but they decide in their minds what will bring more benefit. These people are also from righteous sects. But then why is this young guy offering him consent to save these people? I wonder if the pirate will believe if the boy says that he needs these two to defeat the servant and save the world. Tutajin analyzes our hero and already guesses what kind of character he has. The king has no way of discerning Yu-hyun's skills, but he's sure that some loser wouldn't be able to track Jun-san's movements. The man has no other way but to check everything himself. The man says that there are many things in the world that money cannot solve. A second later, Jun-san immediately rushes to Keidushim. Yu-hyun couldn't let anyone die, so within a moment he rushed to the boy's defense. A second later, our hero stood between Keidushim and the big man, taking the blow. Keidushim was still in shock, but he understood that he had to fight. A second later, he jumped away so as not to disturb their fight. Jun-san, meanwhile, has already taken a swing at the main character. Yu-hyun barely managed to dodge, but the attack still caught and cut through his clothes. Another moment, and he could have died himself. The main character plans to knock out victory with just one blow. His opponent is a master who has reached the initial stage of Radiant Ki, so if the fight drags out, Yu-hyun will definitely lose. You have to put all your strength into a single attack. In terms of strength and quality, it is a level higher than the internal QI that has accumulated in the Diantian. Yu-hyun is sure that the enemy will not be able to dodge or stop his strike, but it seems that the enemy is not worried about this at all. On the contrary, a smile appears on his lips. At this time, he is attacked from behind by the king. He delivers an accurate and strong blow to his head. From such a strong blow, our hero simply falls down and faints. Paraba could not believe that the head of the criminal plan had acted so treacherously. Our hero's eyes were closing. The last thing he saw was the hideous face of the water tamer king, who was smiling bitingly. And after a moment, Yu-hyun completely shut down. Jo-sung wanted to protect his teacher and was already about to get his sword for the fight. But Tutajin looked at him with his piercing gaze and advised him not to make mistakes. Jo-sung was shocked because the enemy was able to suppress him with just one look. Yu-hyun fought at the cost of his own life to save Jo-sung. Is there nothing the boy can do now to thank his teacher? The brave boy takes out his sword, determined to save his teacher. This surprises the king. Jo-sung decides to save his teacher at any cost, even if it means giving up his life. The boy trembles with fear, but points his sword at the enemy. Tutajin immediately understands that this is the will of the sword. Where did these nuggets come from? One of them fights back at Jun-sang, and the other shows his courage and breaks his chi-binding art. But Jo-sung is not in the best condition right now because of the brutality that has completely flooded his brain. This greatly interested the water tamer king. The gray-haired pirate concluded that this boy was definitely a relative of Chan-sung. The boy did not listen to him, and after a second, full of rage and anger, he rushed towards the enemy. The pirate can't just kill him and prevent Jang-sung from seeing what this kid will grow up to be. A second later, he stomps his bare foot on the floor, releasing a lot of energy. Because of this, the waves part, making way for the ship. Finally, they are on the shore. The main character slowly comes to his senses, smelling some pleasant aroma. And when he opens his eyes, he sees Jun-san staring at him and eating fried meat. Yu-hyun jumps in immediately, not understanding what's going on. The man says that first you need to satisfy your hunger. Jun-san personally caught and fried this meat. Sitting around the fire were Kudok, Tutajin, and Jun-san. The king tells the boy to eat something because his stomach must be empty. The main character is definitely not up to it now. He starts to look around, trying to find Jo-sun with his eyes. Yu-hyun is furious when he thinks that those bastards did something to Jo-seong and Kei-dushin. But, fortunately, they felt sorry for them, and nothing was done with them. Jo-sun is slightly injured, but once he wakes up, he will be better. The king says that he is deeply connected to Jang-song, but even so, he will not trample the sprout into the ground. When the protagonist heard this, he sighed in relief. Suddenly, our hero's stomach starts grumbling. He seems to be hungry after all. Yu-hyun thinks that there might be poison in the food. And the pirate, as if sensing his thoughts, says that the more he thinks, the more he poisons himself. After these words, the boy bites a piece. The meat was quite tasty. Tutajin was happy to see that the man liked their food. Meanwhile, Jo-sona was having acupuncture and was just done with it. The doctor notices that the water tamer king for some reason showed mercy to this boy. Kadushin wonders, since when is it mercy to beat a person almost to death? The doctor doesn't understand how the chapter's apprentice can be so stupid. If it weren't for the king of the waters, this boy would have gone mad and become a cripple by now. It is unknown what the king thinks about this child. But he not only suppressed his demonic chi greatly, but also cut off his circulation as a whole. The doctor leaves and asks Kei-dushin to take care of the boy, while he himself sends a letter to the Namgun family. Kei-dushin remembers that day, the moment it happened. He remembers how Jo-sung rushed towards the tamer king. His mind was full of rage and anger, but he stopped the young man with one of his steps. There was a bright yellow flash. The gray-haired pirate in a stern tone and creepy voice told everyone to run away from here. The people of Jiaonmu's alliance understood that the king was serious and quickly hid their swords. And after that, they grabbed our hero and jumped back to their little boat. Kadukson was left alone with Jo-sun, who was unconscious. The young man still could not understand why the king took Mr. Yu with him. Meanwhile, the men were still sitting around the fire. Someone handed Yu Hyun a piece of meat. It was Jun-san. It's amazing that he's behaving so kindly now, because when they were on the battlefield he pounced on our hero like a tiger. And on the other side of him sat the king, who now looked like an ordinary grandfather. How can people change like that? Suddenly, Tutajin hands the main character a cup and offers him a drink, after which he asks how old he is. Yu Hyun takes a sip and then reveals that he is 17. It is amazing that at such a young age he has achieved such strength. The man asked him if the boy had a teacher, but why did he need this information? Is it just interesting? Tutajin demands from the boy an answer to his question. Who taught such a genius? The protagonist calmly replied that he got these skills from his son-in-law, from the Tam family of Hubei. The main thing was not to go into the details of this story. But it seems that the pirates do not quite believe in this story. Tutajin knows the martial arts of the Tam family. They are more bold and domineering, while Yu Hyun's art is plastic and soft. Tutajin understands what is more fundamental here. In addition, the palm technique was different from the usual internal qigong. Yu Hyun is shocked that even the Sword King didn't understand this, and this pirate did. The main character boldly asked if the king was interested in something specific. This is the first time Tutajin has seen energy used in this way, so he wants to know the details. This means that our hero has no teachers in Marima. Yu Hyun can't name the 6 saints who taught him in his past life. Without thinking long, the pirate offers the main character to become his student. Yu Hyun can't believe what the pirate is offering him now. It sounds like some kind of delusion. If the young man becomes his student, Tutajin is ready to close his eyes to all the damage that our hero has done. The main character couldn't believe that he would become the Tamer King's apprentice. Our hero has not yet had time to respond to this offer, but the pirate has already decided everything for him. From that day on, the boy is his student. The man saw that the boy was somehow not very keen to become his student and thought about it. If the young man is not going to accept his offer, the man threatens to beat him. Yu Hyun gets scared when he sees his grandfather's determination and he crawls back a little. Gossip has already reached the old man that the boy is a good swimmer, which means that fate itself has decided that he will become a pirate. The main character understands that he has no arguments against, and that he definitely will not be able to resist the pirate. The Tamer King sees that our hero still has a lot of doubts about this. Therefore, the grandfather rolls up his sleeves and prepares to beat the young man so that he makes his decision sooner. A moment later, a loud scream is heard throughout the forest. Soon, the educational conversation was over. The grandfather sat on a stump in front of the boy and drank alcohol. But the young man still hasn't come to a decision and he asks for a little more time. Then, the grandpa ostentatiously stands up to continue beating him. And it immediately works, as the boy agrees to become his apprentice. Yu Hyun understands that there is nothing he can do in this situation, and it is easier to agree. But the guy agrees to it only if it is temporary. We need to find Hwang Deok-sum as soon as possible and return to the Union. Unfortunately, our hero still hasn't gotten any information from Hwang Deok-sum about the second treasure. And in order to get this treasure faster than the servant, he must come to the Jongmu Alliance. If anyone finds out that Yu Hyun has become the king's apprentice, everyone will look at him strangely, and he will turn into a frog who will only look at everything from afar. In order to gain experience and expand the river pirates to scale in the future, his teacher must open a path for him. Yu Hyun is happy to see that the teacher bought into his lie. If everything that each of our heroes is now true, then the pirate is ready to suffer a little. But if the boy dares to lie, then Tutajin will wipe off the face of the earth everyone and everything that has anything to do with him. He tells Jung Sang to pass on the order that Yu Hyun is now the young lord of their Yangtze, but no one must know about him. And if someone finds out about it, the pirate swears that he will kill the culprit in the same second. Immediately after that, our hero gets on the boat and goes about his business. The guy justifies to himself that he obeyed only because it was a strategy. Later, he promises to defeat absolutely all pirates that he can get his hands on. As soon as the boy eats all the spiritual treasures and spiritual grass, he will defeat this grandfather with one hand. Meanwhile, the king conqueror of waters sits on a stone and continues to drink alcohol. Suddenly, he hears a voice and is interrupted from his work. Someone calls him water. And when the grandfather looks up, he sees an indignant Chang Sung approaching him. The man immediately starts yelling at this damn pirate for daring to touch his children. The king excuses himself and says that the man misunderstood everything. He found out that his grandson was on that ship too late, so there was nothing he could do. Chang Sung had already heard the news that the pirate had cleared his grandson's circulation. Soon, the men begin to quarrel among themselves. The King of Swords asks the cursed pirate to bring our hero back to them. Jang Zung says that the main character is his student, so the pirate must bring him back. But Tutajin perfectly understands that this is all a lie, and there is nothing you can do about it, because he took the boy for himself. The man asks what will happen if he can't bring Yu Hyun back. Just at the mention of it, the man rushed at him with a sword. He flashed through him and designed his clothes. The King of Swords is very angry with his enemy. If the man had not dodged in time, he could have already gone to another world. A second later, he jumped into the water. Tutajin is now extremely angry. Did the Mouse King really want to kill him just now? But Jang Sung didn't come here to joke. As soon as the pirate comes out of the water, the man threatens to cut him to pieces. Then, the gray-haired man realizes that he really was serious. Then, the pirate begins to radiate his inner strength and tells the man to attack. Jun San was watching all of this. Chan Song could not attack because the pirate was in the water, and the pirate could not attack because Chan Song was on shore. Tutajin sighed, realizing that they were acting like children now. The pirate says that the boy swam away a long time ago and is probably somewhere in Wuhan. A second later, the grandfather pushes off the board he was swimming on and jumps up. A moment later, he lands next to the man. Chong Sung believes him, because even though he is a criminal, he did not lie. After that, the man hides his sword and finally thanks the pirate for saving his nephew. Tutajin offers the man a drink before he leaves to relax and lighten his soul. Without thinking for a long time, the man agrees. The main thing is that everything is fine with his grandson. Meanwhile, our hero was detained somewhere in the middle of the sea. The guy tries to justify himself and say that this is some kind of misunderstanding. But strangers say that the union itself will decide whether it is an understanding or not. They're going to tie the guy up, but the boy wasn't too upset because he was going to the Zhongmu Alliance to meet Huang Doksum anyway, so he gives in to avoid making a fuss. The gates to the union open and the cart drives inside. The main character carefully looks around. The young man had the impression that he was in a forest that was entirely made of gazebos. It really fascinated the boy, and he couldn't tear his eyes away. The man who watched our hero heard the story that he himself defeated the mountain robbers and was able to resist the pirates. But now he looks like a simple boy who suits his age. Yu Hyun wondered how much people respected Chief Jungmu. The boy begins to fantasize about what will happen if he becomes a hero who stopped the chaos, and in honor of this he is appointed the head of the union. He dreams of how, as the head of the union, he will be respected throughout Murima. But after a second, the boy comes to reality and realizes that in order for this plan to come true, he must first deal with Huang Doksum. Soon, they arrive at the room where the great counselor is doing his work. They go inside, and as soon as the man entered the room, he immediately fell on his knees in front of him and began to greet him. Here was the head of the union. The head stood by the window and looked at the scenery. After a second, he told our hero to enter. It was Li Haksong, the head of the Zhongmu Alliance, also nicknamed the White Warrior. The man's tone sounds very soft and calm, but why does it carry so much weight? This is not a lust for murder, but only a desire for the advantage of the stronger. His teacher had told him that if Haxon had been alive and led the fight, they might have been able to stop the Servant of Chaos. Grandfather feels a strong energy from this young man, even though he is only 17. He had the look of a dragon. Chigal Subom was the teacher of one of his teachers in a past life, and the other was the head of a union that even his teacher worshipped. Yu Hyun feels as if he has entered the den of real tigers. You have to concentrate. Chigal Subom turned to our hero and asked if he was the same one who made a mess on the Yangtze River. The protagonist introduced himself to them and said that he only did this to protect the people. Then he asks who the middle-aged man was, who was also on the ship. It's very surprising that Yu Hyun didn't understand who he was talking about, because according to the passengers, he rushed to his defense. The boy was sure that they had already asked Huang Doksum, but he didn't seem to say that the young man was asking him about the 1,000-year-old shell. Therefore, Yu Hyun must quickly come up with a believable answer. A second later, the guy makes a move on the girl who is pouring tea for them. Lee Haxon instantly grabbed the young man's hand and stopped him, not understanding what he was up to. But, it turns out, this is how the main character answered their questions. The answer was as follows. The boy rushed without thinking, for the sake of saving people. Grandfather laughed at his actions, but recognized his victory. Yu Hyun asks how the man he saved is feeling. Chegal Subom says that his behavior is very strange, because he just said that he does not know him at all. They also have information that Yu Hyun used violence, but he quickly comes up with an excuse and says that he did it because Huang Doksum almost put innocent people in great danger. The protagonist fell silent, hoping that they would believe his words. Chehal Subom says that the man is now in prison and asks if our hero wants to meet him. It seems that they purposely invited the boy to interrogate the man in order to track him down and find out what his purpose was for saving Huang Doksum. Hyun has to swallow this bait because he wants to know where the 1,000-year-old shell is, but the main character is still sure that everything will go according to his plan. Chehal Subom is going to see how long the boy will continue to lie to them. He seems to guess that this is all false. The last question he was asked was why the Water Tamer King took pity on him and didn't kill him. The guy calmly replies that they agreed with the pirate that he will pay him for all the damages. Lee Huxon wasn't going to pretend that he believed this delusion. He is sure that the pirate should have killed him. If they don't believe him, he suggests asking the pirate about it personally. If the boy had been caught, his father would certainly not have sat on the sidelines, so he was spared. Soon, they finished the conversation and our hero left. Men perfectly understood that the main character was simply deceiving them, but they had to pretend to believe. They were also surprised that the boy had no inner strength at all. But when the grandfather stopped the boy's provocation, he felt a small return, which means that he uses another place for spiritual practice. The head understands very well that the Tamer King and the Sword King would not show interest in an ordinary child, so there is a reason for this. Grandpa thinks they better keep this guy around. Maybe he can help them in their case. They plan to gather all the hidden dragons from all over the world and unite them into one battle squad. But so far, the results look very pessimistic. Those who can be called hidden dragons are usually the heirs of their families, so it is not so easy to lure them to you. Judging by the doctor's words, Joe Song, you may rise to a new level soon. There were rumors that this boy was also helped by the King Water Tamer. The young gentleman, for the sake of saving people, himself faced the Black Whale pirates and remained alive even after meeting with the Water Tamer King. Also, he is from a respectable family, handsome, and has everything you need. There were also rumors that Jo Sung had risen to the level of Radiant Chi while he was with Yu Hyun. Grandfather simply gave the ground for thinking, but all the details of the plan remain with the man. Meanwhile, the main character has already come to his student to see how he is doing. The guy was all covered in bandages, and even his face. Suddenly, Kei Duxin runs into the room and asks if Jo Sung is here to join the Hidden Dragon Squad as well. Now it is the turn of this bastard to run to his subordinates, but our hero understands that I can't just take him and beat him. Besides, the problem is not with him, but with other teachers as well. Unexpectedly, the main character snatches an important document from the boy's hands, which contains a list of all the members of the squad. The boy reads it carefully and realizes that absolutely all his teachers from the past life are here. Chansu of the Tang family was here. Hyun, the immortal sword of the Udan clan. Gang, a Shaolin monk. Chehal Murin, divine strategist. He plans to conquer all the cursed teachers under the pretext of the Hidden Dragon unit. Kadushin's skin felt goosebumps from such a tense atmosphere. After a moment, the main character says to sign him up with Jo Sun to the Hidden Dragon unit.